I'd admit all buttons fun.
Yes, I know.
You know, I just realized that button was there like 5 days ago.
In fairness, so did I.
It was really embarrassing actually when I saw it. I was like, wow, you can do this?
I,
Sitting around like an idiot since
Per-
COVID, basically.
perhaps since we both just discovered it, maybe it's a new thing, or perhaps we're both just slow.
I just think we're slow.
I think
That's
we're
also
Like
a
a
close.
select all
possibility.
button that I didn't even know was there.
It's been there for a long time, folks. A
Thank
long
you.
time.
Thank you for rubbing
Sorry.
it in.
Fair enough. All right, we'll get going in just a minute. Folks still sort of jumping in.
What are you eating, Jen? Looks
A baked potato?
mashed potato?
No baked potato.
Oh.
Yeah. It's my go-to easy thing to make real quick in the microwave. I'm very fancy that way.
How was your trip home?
My trip home was uneventful. Sure, I went to Your Roots Are Showing in Ireland, hung out with Cheryl for a bit. But when I tell people that I went there, I basically say I was in a hotel that just happened to be in Ireland.
Yeah,
Well,
that's right.
Ireland.
Yeah. That's sad. And
Everybody was like, "How was Ireland?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just saw the inside of a hotel."
Yep. Yep.
boo.
As someone that did corporate training for a couple of years, it was pretty much the same thing. I couldn't tell you anything about any of the
Yeah.
place. I'd be gone for 2.5 weeks and I'd come back and it'd be like, you saw so many things. I'm like, I saw airports and hotel rooms.
That's it. And the bar.
Not even that.
At least we had sessions in the bar. We saw good music there.
Ireland.
Oh, it was great.
When you're in Cleveland.
Right. Dan and Matt, we can probably give it another minute, but you've got 24 participants.
I'm
the
on your
meeting-
leash. Tell me when you want to go.
And the meeting is recording.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. A few weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, Dan and I thought it'd be really good to kind of address some of these questions about our tax returns. And to our pleasant surprise, we actually have found some new information about a week and a half ago, which Dan is going to talk about. I want to point out and thank Donnelly Berard for joining us. She is our accountant. So we thought that as Dan has a tremendous depth of information, but we thought that our CPA joining us would be able to validate anything we talk about or maybe add extra content if necessary. So today we're going to talk about the 2019 late filing, and we're going to talk about the 2020 tax return, particularly as it pertains to the compensation of Tribal Mischief and Ethan Baird. Dan is going to do most of the heavy lifting. I am the CEO of a private wealth management firm, 25 years in the industry, and a CEO for 11. So I'm a little bit more informal if context is necessary, but Dan is going to really drive most of the heavy lifting. But I'm going to start by sort of covering, because it's very simple, the 2019 late tax return. Yes, we filed late. There was some legitimate concern that our tax-exempt status was at risk from the IRS's perspective. And there's also, separate from that, a concern that our tax-exempt status was in jeopardy from FAI's perspective. Those are not true, definitively. If you file late taxes as a tax-exempt organization, what triggers your tax-exempt status is not filing on time for 3 consecutive years. I am going to share my screen because I have the IRS's website up. And you can just go to irs.gov to find this. And I've highlighted, let me just zoom in here. If anybody has, if an organization that fails to file the required information, et cetera, for 3 consecutive years will automatically lose its tax-exempt status. The reality is that roughly 25 million taxpayers every year file late for a variety of different reasons. I own a financial firm, and we had to file late a few years ago. It happens. We did. Now, our filing late was unintentional. It was an error. However, I want to disband any concern that our tax-exempt status was ever in jeopardy from the IRS's perspective, because it wasn't. If anybody is told that or hears that or reads about it or is asked a question from this point on, please correct that person. Our tax status was never in jeopardy from the perspective of the IRS. Now, separate from that, there was also a legitimate concern that our tax-exempt status was at risk from FAI's perspective. And also, there was some concern that FAI had threatened to drop us from their platform. We asked FAI to provide any documentation they had of any kind that they expressed any concern of our tax-exempt status, or if they had sent us any written correspondence or any formal correspondence at any time regarding any threat to drop us from their platform because our taxes were filed late in 2019. They were kind enough to respond in detail, and they wrote that no, at no time did they threaten to drop us from their platform in 2019. So again, I'm going to ask, if anybody reads about or hears about a concern that FAI was going to drop us and they expressed concern that our tax status was in jeopardy, that is definitively untrue. We do have the letter from FAI recognizing and validating that that didn't happen. And if anybody would like to see that letter, I don't have it on my screen. Dan Godfrey probably does, but they sent us that letter, I don't know, late last week, because we asked for it for this meeting. So the 2019 late tax filing at no time put our tax-exempt status in jeopardy from either the perspective of the IRS or FAI. This meeting is being recorded, so I ask the community to thank you for putting that concern out there, because that would be concerning. And it is not true definitively. We're going to move on to the more complicated issue, but before we do, with Dan's help, let us answer any other questions regarding our 2019 tax filing. Is that, Dan, should we do that? Well, then we'll move on to the 2022.
Yeah, but Jennifer Rowe had her hand up, and I don't know if she wanted to speak to the matter.
Yeah, I'm looking at the cameras. I didn't even notice who's got. So Jennifer, fire away.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Jennifer Rowe. I'm the interim executive director at Focal Alliance International. I've been on the Focal Alliance staff for over 10 years. And just to address Michael Kornfeld's comment in the chat, yes, there was a point in time where Focal Alliance was very concerned that NERFA was not filing their tax returns, and a letter was sent. I think this is a letter that you're referring to, Matthew, to NERFA in 2017. It was not the 2019 taxes at all. That was completely separate, and I don't believe ever hearing concern or filing, or I did not find any evidence that we reached out to NERFA regarding the 2019 taxes. We, Focal Alliance, does reach out to our group exemption members. We have over 50 of them. NERFA is one of those group exemption members. If they are not filing the paperwork with Focal Alliance on time, we request you file it. They file every year around March. We will reach out and ask for that, and I'm sure that correspondence did occur. But the filing or the concern was back in 2017. The letter was sent in June of 2017. And Michael, you were the president of NERFA at that time, and of course was a board member at that time. And there was a very big concern that NERFA was behind, and we could not see evidence of 3 years of tax returns at that time. That was resolved thanks to Michael in leading that charge and making sure that NERFA was up to date. Justin was not the treasurer at that time. I believe the treasurer at that time may have been, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but I think it was Terry Muchler who signed the tax returns those years. And yeah, I just wanted to verify that information. Happy to answer any questions from the Folk Alliance perspective.
Thank you, Jennifer. And yes, that is the letter I was referring to. You had made reference to a letter in 2017. Yes, that's what I was referring to. Thank you. Any other
Okay.
questions about 2019? I want to thank the community for expressing concern. I know that how the tax rules work are not very clear to people that are not financial professionals, and I want to validate that concern, that's a concern. Now that it's been addressed, I hope that the community will join me in correcting anybody that talks about our risk of losing our tax exempt status. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Dan. Cheryl, did you have your question up, your hand up?
I do. So first off, Jennifer Rowe, thank you. Thank you for stepping in as interim director, and thank you for clarifying the facts here. I'm just curious, does Folk Alliance or does NERFA, current or former treasurers or current or former board member, have any explanation for why the 2019 tax return was filed late? And are we current now? Are we totally compliant?
Oh, yes. So we filed our 2020, 2022, excuse me, we filed our 2020, 2021, and 2022 on time, and we're probably going to be filing our 2023 probably within the next, I'll say 2 or 3 weeks. So it should be done by mid-February latest. I shouldn't, you know what, I shouldn't have said that, but it's very close. I've already got a copy of the prelim. The reason that the 2019 returns were filed late, sort of a combination of two things. The most obvious reason to us is that Justin was over his head. That's why. And it took a lot more time than Justin thought. And when he started to realize how much of an animal this was going to be, there just wasn't enough time left. So, he ran out of time. That's it.
I thought Jennifer just said that Justin was not treasurer at the time.
At 2017, he was not the treasurer in 2017 when NERFA did send a strongly worded letter to the board.
FAI.
I'm sorry, thank you, FAI in 2017. He was the treasurer for the 2019, and he's not a financial professional. He was over his head.
Sure. Okay, so I'm sorry, I just need to, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here. So 17, we were late.
Correct.
And that wasn't Justin's thing. 2018, we were late. Sorry, 17, we were late. Justin wasn't treasurer. Terry Muchler was, you said, Jennifer? And 2018, same deal. And then 2019, Justin came in and tried to fix stuff and it took a while. Am I close?
Correct. That's correct.
And we are current right now, and there's no penalties and no IRS letters, no Folk Alliance mean letters. We're good now.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Dan, before you go, I just want to add one more thing. There was another complication, which was has to do with legacy software. And, that sort of created a lot more work. But I want to be clear to the community. We filed late on 2019 because we didn't have it together in time. That's it. That was our mistake. So yeah, that's the reason.
Okay, I'd like to put a little more perspective on that, both for you, Cheryl, and for everyone else who's listening in on this. So, one of the challenges, and I've talked about this at our last two community meetings at the conference. One of the challenges for an organization like NERFA and like many other organizations is that for years and years and years and years, we were a founder-run organization. And like many people who found an organization, the focus was on providing the services, and creating this beautiful thing, which Diane and others created. And when you then hit the point where you're transitioning to a board-run organization, you start to address and think about all of these things that aren't necessarily the first thing that's on everyone's minds when you're just focusing on serving the organization. Like, you need certain structures that, you know, often get built later, you know, long after the founders are gone by organizations. And this is not unusual, and it's not in any way critical of anyone who was ever involved with NERFA. You know, we are all extraordinarily grateful for all the work that went into forming NERFA and making this a success for so many years. But when we were in that transition in 2019, the things that we were confronting is that Justin, it wasn't just Justin. The organization had no real policies, procedures, ways of operating in place.
That's not true. That's not true, Dan.
You weren't on the board then.
I'm sorry, what year?
In 2019, when Justin was treasurer.
But going back to what you said about the fact that there was no structure, there was a board. Yes, the first 5 years, I'm sure it was whatever it was. But after that, every year there was a full board. There were elections every year, and Diane Tankel has every single year of information about the finances on her computer to this day, and you can see she had reports year after year after year. It was well run, and this is the third time that you said that there was no board until 2019. That's not true.
Okay, that was not what I said. I said that there were no policies and procedures.
That's not true, but it's not a true statement.
Okay, if that's not true, I can only speak from what I do know. We inherited none of those. Like, if there was a financial procedures manual for the organization, we didn't inherit it. If there was controls in place to, that normally get developed by nonprofit organizations to make sure that the mistakes aren't made, to make sure that we're reporting on time, all of those things, we didn't inherit any of that. I'm not.
You didn't ask for it. You didn't ask for it.
Well, that's.
Anyways, we're not going to go into that. We're not going to go into that.
Cheryl,
but it was. Anyways, it's fine. But please,
Cheryl,
please stop saying that this organization wasn't well run until you guys got on board.
I have never said that.
You just did.
No, that is how you are interpreting it. What I said, and I'll say it again, is that typically organizations do not have all of the trappings that nonprofits develop over time that, generally come later. And it's not a criticism, it's a recognition of the way in which organizations operate. No one is criticizing anyone who was involved previously or saying that they did anything that they shouldn't have done or that they didn't do things well. This was a well-run organization. We had a lot of wonderful things happening. All I'm talking about is that when the board that took over after, the time that Diane was running the organization, there were things that needed to be put in place that weren't in place yet. And we worked at doing that, and that takes time. And in the year that Justin was treasurer, that was one of those transition years right after Diane left. And there were a lot of things that needed to be done to both, help the organization function at the level that we needed to function, and also to make clear the kinds of things that were happening with Justin. Like, one of the things that was a problem for us is that normally you do things like segregation of duties when you're setting up a system for accounting and keeping your books. So the person who writes the checks won't necessarily be the person who approves the transaction, and you have people who are looking over the books. You have a finance committee. You have someone who's looking over to make sure that what's happening in your organization is what should be happening. And those kinds of policies and procedures weren't in place. So we were getting regular reports, as I'm sure you were in the days when Diane was running the organization. We were getting regular reports. Every month there would be a financial report presented. So because none of these policies and procedures were in place, we had no way of identifying that there was a problem until it came and we were face to face with it. Until we realized as a board that there were going to be problems in putting together the information that was needed for the 990 in 2019, we didn't know it, and it came as a surprise. And it involved, there were a lot of factors that fed into it. I know that there are a lot of people who just want to point the finger at Justin, but it was an organizational problem. It was not just a Justin problem. We didn't have the kinds of things in place that would allow us to identify what was going on. And as we learned about it, we started addressing it, and it took a lot of time to address it. And I can tell you, in fairness to Justin, because what happened that year was that I ultimately stepped in and put together all of the information for the entire year that we needed for the 990, because I had a background in doing this and I knew how to do it. But it was complicated. I had to get information from Diane, which, yes, she had shared, just so I don't get told again I'm criticizing Diane had shared information, but as Matt just pointed out, she had kept her books in an old software program that when that information was sent to Justin and then later to Matt, because we asked for his help, no one could open the information. So the way I had to get the information ultimately was to ask Diane to print out, a ledger from her software program that I could then use to start to put together the set of books. And she had kept the books for part of the year, and then Justin had taken over, and Justin had his books. So there were those two things. There were about 4 different bank accounts, including PayPal and Diane's personal bank account and another bank account. All of those had to be reconciled for the year. There were, I can say, it took me, and I've done this for years, took me at least 100 hours in a week's time to put together all of
I very
the.
much appreciate it. I just want to say one thing. I'm sorry if my sound is off. I know what I did wrong. I'm going to tell you. Thank you. I just want to say, because nobody said it, I am very, very, very grateful, Dan, that you stepped in when you did and that you worked as closely with Diane as you did to take over the books. I don't think anybody really knows how much you did then and that you were doing it. And I just want to say thank you, because I know how you're feeling, but I'm very grateful that you took over when you did, because I think you saved the organization. So there's that.
Hey, Dan, we should probably listen for Michael and then move on to 2022, but I wanted to give everybody else a really funny perspective of one thing that went down. Diane did keep the records, and she kept it in Quicken, which is a very well-known piece of software. The fact that she had an older copy just meant that she had owned it for several years, but she was using a very well-known personal finance software. But as the organization got bigger and bigger and bigger, a personal finance software didn't really cut it anymore. So we had to go to QuickBooks, which is a professional, organizational level piece of software. I know a lot of organizations that use Quicken, and at some point they get big enough that they're like, oh my God, we can't use Quicken anymore. The problem was that when they converted, nobody had the version that she had. And it gets funnier. Finally, they're like, Matt, can your company somehow get a version of this old software? I said, yes, we actually can. There's a way to do that because these things happen. We get the software, and it's so old that our computer system, our security software, wouldn't let the software run because the software was old enough that it lacked certain security measures that are legally required to run at a bank. So we got the software and we couldn't even run it. And that's when Dan was like, hey, maybe you can just print it out and I'll do all this by hand. So there is some humor to be had, but I wanted to make it clear that Diane was using very well-known software. It's just that we had matriculated and we needed something more robust. because the prior board had grown the organization so well that now we're big and like, oh my God, we need something that's really more appropriate for a larger organization. So I think that puts good perspective as kind of funny. Dan, I'm going to hand this back to you if you want to field some questions from Mike, or you want to go to 2022, but we should get there.
Okay, what I'd like to do, if people don't mind, I would like to, field any questions people have. But since we invited Donnelly Berard here to explain anything that we weren't able to explain, I wanted to go to the issue of reporting Ethan's income, and then we can come back to 2019. Just to clarify, Donnelly Berard's firm is a firm that we hire to prepare our 990s. Describing them as our accountant is not accurate in the sense that they are not doing our books. They are not our accountant. What they do is prepare our 990. Let me explain how that's done, and then I'm going to leave it to Donnelly Berard for a second. So when you start putting in place some of these procedures, things become both easier and much more transparent. So when we went to QuickBooks, everything is done in QuickBooks Online. And what that means is that when Donnelly Berard or whoever in her firm is preparing our 990 form, they are going online into our actual books. They can see everything that we've done there, including running an audit report that will tell them anything we've changed. So if we were of a nature where we wanted to create some kind of problem with the books, it would be discovered if that was happening. The other thing to understand is that when we do the books online and the firm prepares the 990, they are not taking information we send them and then entering it themselves in a way that would allow for errors to be made. What we send them is what is directly used to prepare the report. So what we've done online, rather, what we've done in our accounting books is what they do to prepare the report. So here's what happened, and then I'll turn it over to Donnelly. We have been filing every year since Ethan Baird has been an employee, and while we were contracted with Tribal Mischief, we have been filing 990s that correctly listed all of the income that Ethan Baird and/or Tribal Mischief was collecting. There's a part in the 990, and I can show it to you if we need to get to that, where you report compensation. And every year we have reported it. Up until this past week, that was all we knew, like everyone else who sends in their taxes, right? We send the information to Donnelly, someone in her office, prepares the 990 report within the software. The report is sent to the government. And like everyone else who might do their taxes electronically these days, one assumes that the IRS has received what you sent. I mean, if you can take a second and just think about your own taxes, right? When you send your taxes in, you don't then request the IRS send you a copy of the taxes you just sent in to make sure that what they received is what you sent. You make the assumption that the software you're using when you send this this information to the IRS is going to be exactly what you sent them. So what happened, and we didn't find this out until just this week, and there's reasons for this. What happened is that the IRS has a different 990 than we sent them. And there are a couple of things that are discrepancies there. We have now spoken to everyone involved with the process to try and figure out how that could be. I spent 7 hours on the line with different IRS agents in the last week trying to see how this could have happened. I spent hours on the line with GuideStar, who had just put up our 2022 990 and it had errors, and I looked at it, and it was the first time I had gotten to see it because the IRS is way behind on when they're putting things up publicly. You wouldn't even see the 2022 on the IRS site yet because they're so behind. They're years behind in putting up the 990s, and they're still catching up. Anyway, I just found this out. So I have spoken to the IRS. I have spoken to Lacerte, who is the aggregator. Like when a financial firm like Donnelly's uploads the 990, it goes to an aggregator who then sends it to the IRS. Accounting firms don't send it directly to the IRS. They send it through these services. Lacerte is a company that is owned and run by Intuit, who is associated with QuickBooks. So all of this is going directly from our QuickBooks to what we thought was the IRS in an accurate form. But we recently did learn that it's not accurate. And I'm going to turn it over to Donnelly just to kind of give you another kind of perspective and a sense of what's going on.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I don't know if I can add much more to what Dan says. I can assure you that what we did put into the software did include all the financial data that balanced, as well as the salary information was included in there. When you print the return off of our software, it's included there. So, you know, since then, I'd be honest with you, in all my over 30 years of doing this, I don't think anybody's ever tried to match up GuideStar to it before. So I don't know how prevalent this issue is. We have called the Lacerte as well, and everybody points the finger at everybody else. They said, they assured us that if it's in the software, it got sent. And Dan spoke to IRS and said, whatever they gave us is what we've got. So somewhere in between, it did not happen. Personally, I think it's probably something in the Lacerte, only because it happened 2 years in a row. And I'm just thinking that the transition, it just didn't happen there. So I'm a little hesitant exactly on how to file the 23 because we're ready to do that. It's actually all set to go, except IRS is not accepting tax returns yet until after the 29th. So I am actually inclined to start a new file or at least delete the that employee and re-enter them and to switch it up somehow, because I think there's something in the transmission file that isn't working. And if that is the case, I want to try and prevent that so that doesn't happen again. But I can tell you it was in there. We do not file tax returns without all the information that's required. We're doing well over 200 nonprofit returns, and we make sure everything is complete that needs to be there. So I will welcome any questions that may happen, if you have any questions on the software. But all the printouts that we have include all salaries and wages. And GuideStar gets it directly from the Internal Revenue. So if Internal Revenue file doesn't have it, then GuideStar isn't going to have it. But whatever this is deleted, the rest of the return, I peeked at the rest of the return, and all the other numbers seem to be correct. Although oddly, the years on some of the pages are wrong. Our software for sure didn't have different years on the different pages. So to some extent, there is something a little wonky coming from IRS into the GuideStar. But supposedly that's the chain. It goes from us to Lacerte to Internal Revenue to GuideStar. So between the 4 transmissions going on there is a likelihood that some little piece of something got deleted. So is there any questions? So again, I see coming up here any other discrepancies. I do not see any of the, I checked, I didn't do every single line, but I did check the first page. It had the revenue and expenses that looked the same. The balance sheet all looked the same. So all those key numbers look the same. So it's just that one field that seems to be the one that's the issue.
if I might add some context, and my screen froze, so I apologize to the community if I waste an extra minute, but just so everybody knows, when you file your taxes electronically, they don't go actually directly to the IRS. There's no way for the IRS to be able to handle that from a tech perspective. It goes to an aggregator. In this case, the CPA firm uses the CERT, and they take millions of tax returns and they do a data dump to the IRS. So when you when your accountant files electronically, it doesn't go directly from the accountant to the IRS. There is an intermediary there, just so that everybody knows that it goes from us to the accountant to the intermediary and then to the IRS. And GuideStar will have hopefully a copy of what the IRS has. The second thing is that I want to make mention that for a while now, there have been a lot of community members that have told us that they have this copy of our tax return that's not right. Right from the beginning, I think it was Genevieve who mentioned that, but she wouldn't send us a copy of it. And so it was only like a week and a half ago that somebody happened to mention that they had a copy from GuideStar. And we're like, let's go to GuideStar. So went to GuideStar, Dan downloads it, and we're totally surprised. So this concern, so for a while now, I think that there was a piece of context that nobody thought to bring up, not us or anybody else, where people are like, I'm seeing something different. We're like, what are you talking about? Like, we have our tax return. Here's a copy of it. But it wasn't until a week and a half ago that somebody happened to mention on the side that they got it from GuideStar. And that is what led us to this new information that, holy cow, there really is a tax return out there that does not match what we got. Reach out to the accounting firm, reach out to the intermediary, we've reached out to the IRS. And so this is very new. So there was a question on the chat I saw about, like, why is this all coming out? Well, the reason for that is because there was a legitimate concern out in the community, but we didn't know where it was coming from. And it was only till somebody mentioned GuideStar that we were like, let's go to GuideStar and see what they got. Lo and behold, here we are.
I want to say one other thing, because I see what's being posted in the chat about, so is a public apology going to be offered? Are you going, so we will write all along? This is very disturbing to me. I have to tell you, I came into NERFA because I love music, and I had a lot of skills to offer, and I thought, gee, this is a great organization. I wanna be a part of this. And it was because people like Cheryl Prasker treated my son really kindly and helped them get a start in the world. It was because I had heard nothing but great things about this community. And the thing that's been most disturbing about what's been happening is that we kept trying to see where this was coming from. The first conversation I had about this was way back at the Falcon Ridge Festival a couple of years ago, when Genevieve and Kathy came to talk with me and said, how come you're not reporting the income for Ethan Baird and Tribal Mischief? And I said, of course I am. And they said, no, you're not. And I said, yeah, I am. And then we had a discussion, and I was able to figure out from that discussion that they were talking about the 2021 form that we had sent in, and that because we changed our fiscal year that year, and we had a short year from July of 21 to December of 21, that was where the majority of the income to Tribal Mischief was reported that year. And I sent that information to them and asked that if they had something different, that gets sent to me so I could look at it and compare it. And I never received it. And I never received from anyone who was raising any of these concerns, any of the documentation of what they were talking about. All I had in front of me, all the board of NERFA had in front of them the entire time that this whole thing has been going on, was what we filed. What was given to us by our accountant after they filed it. They send us a copy. We put the copy on our website. We have never seen until a week ago a form that was any different from that. I don't know what people are thinking about all of this. I recognize there's a lot of emotions, a lot of charged emotions about it, all of this. But I have to tell you, as someone who's just in it to serve a community, I thought, had done some very kind and wonderful things for my child and for the world in general. For me, this has been, depressing, let's put it that way. And I would ask.
I just need to speak quickly. And Michael's had his hand up for half an hour. And I'm going to just say something very quickly because I really think we can actually move on. This is going to be a very uncomfortable statement, but I know it's true. And I apologize because it's not me, because I don't like this either. This is not us. This is not folk music. For Christ's sake, it's folk music. For Christ's sake, this shouldn't be happening. But I will just make one blanket statement, and we don't need to discuss it. But I can tell you right now, if Justin Nordell resigned as president, not go away, but resigned as president, all of this would go away. And that is all I have to say. It would go away in a split second. Trust me. It would be like none of this ever happened. If he were to if the board of directors would just ask him to do us all a favor and step down, this uncomfortableness, anxiety, anger, whatever at this point, because at this point it's just making me sick to my stomach, it would go away. And we don't need to discuss it any further. No, move on.
Okay, I'm going to ask if there's any further questions for Donnelly Berard, because I'd like to, she was really kind in coming to this meeting, but we're probably going to have more things to discuss, and we should try and do that. But is there anything else that anyone wants to ask while we have her on the call with us? Okay, thank you, Donnelly, for being here. Very much appreciated. And you and I will talk about what the next steps are to try and get this kerfuffle fixed. Thank you so much.
All right, sounds good. All right,
Okay.
bye-bye.
Michael has his hand up, Dan.
Okay, go ahead, Michael. Michael, are you still there? I see his hand and darkness, but I think he's moving behind the darkness somewhere.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There he
Yes.
is.
Okay.
We can't
First of
hear
all,
you,
going
Michael.
back to
Can
a
we
while
see him?
ago, a statement that Cheryl made, I just wanted to echo her sentiments. I was very pleased, Dan, when you joined the board and when you offered to help.
Sorry,
do more-
Michael, I'm going to
Yeah.
interrupt you. Two things. First off, there are two Cheryls on this call, and we both love NERFA very much.
Okay,
If you
Cheryl
could
Prasker.
clarify which Cheryl, since we've both
Cheryl
spoken.
Prasker.
And second, if you are able, if you could show your face, it would be great. So it feels like we're having a conversation. We can.
Okay, let me see why that's not on.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
It should be on, but I'm on a phone, so I don't know if my face is showing because I'm not sure how this is working. I don't usually use the phone for this, but I'm out. But let me go on. Let me say what it was. I very much appreciated Dan's efforts early on when he first joined the board, and I don't even recall, Dan, if you had been to a NERFA conference at that point. But you very quickly jumped into doing things and to assisting. And we did have, as you mentioned, a difficult situation. Justin had stepped up to be treasurer at the time because nobody else was willing to do it. That much is true. And then you offered to assist him. What you neglected to mention is you repeatedly offered to assist him, and he repeatedly declined your offers of assistance until I started getting the calls and the emails from Jared Rivers, who at the time was the Regions Alliance, among other things, at Folk Alliance, because we had not provided the financial information that was requested weeks earlier, later months earlier, for the group to be as part of the group exemption program. I had provided early on all of the other information, along with assistance from other members of our board, all of the other written information that was required for that. So contrary to what Jen Rose said earlier, and I have the greatest respect for Jen, the situation that we had.
Can I chime in here? I am confident that Jared sent those emails. I indicated that I didn't see any unusual emails or whatever. I'm sure that there were emails sent. I'm looking primarily in Angus's old inbox or outbox. I'm
Mhm.
sure Jared sent that because he had the role of sending those to all of our group exemption members that were late. And I promise you that that NERFA was not the only one. Every year, we are reaching out to a handful of our group exemption members, trying to gather and capture the data. Unfortunately, this is a common problem that we have. And absolutely, NERFA was late that year. I'm not at all questioning that. They were clearly late in providing us the information. Was there concern that we were going to remove them from the group exemption program, or was there concern that they would lose the IRS status? Absolutely not. And that was the
Okay,
question
I have
that
to
was brought up.
disagree with you there because Angus told me that straight out. And
Not in,
I had to,
certainly not
I
in his
had to
email
speak.
correspondence to you.
No, 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 no. I had
Verbally,
to
but not in email.
verbally. I was at a board meeting. There was a Regions Committee meeting to discuss the situation with NERFA. I was then called out at a Folk Alliance board meeting because I was on the Folk Alliance board at the same time, and it was so embarrassing. And Angus had to tell them at the board meeting that I had done everything right. And in fact, earlier than the other regions had submitted all the materials except for the financial information because that was not my role. I was not the treasurer, and that we had tried. Angus sent emails, Angus and Jared sent emails and phoned Justin as well. I still have those emails. I can also tell you, and I didn't want to bring this up, but since others are saying on this call are saying that this didn't happen, I have to say it. There were discussions among board members of NERFA at the time, the two board members who are on this call now, and me as a past president at the time, about removing Justin from the board then for not doing his doing what he was supposed to do, and for continually telling us at meeting after meeting, at phone call and email after email, that it'll be done tomorrow, it'll be done next week. And weeks went by and months went by, and finally Dan, who had offered to step up much earlier, just said, we got to do this, we're stepping in, we're doing this. But there was one other part that came into it too. Justin first then told us, I'm retaining an accountant that's going to help us complete this, so you don't have to worry about it. That was not for him to do. That was at the very least, he should have come to the board about that. Who is this accountant and whatever? The accountant turned out to be a cousin of his. That's neither here nor there. But the fact was that, yes, in 2017, issues were raised. They did not rise to the level of me as president of the NERFA board being questioned by the Folk Alliance board about what is happening with NERFA. We were the latest. We weren't one of those who were late. We were the latest, just with the financial part that for 2019. I'm not saying we were in trouble under the IRS, but we were in, there was real concern expressed by the board, by board members of Folk Alliance and by Angus at the time about our lateness in getting the financial information to complete the exemption.
I absolutely believe that. Yes, I absolutely believe that there was frustration from Folk Alliance for not receiving the data in a timely manner. It is frustrating when we're not getting information that we're managing 50 different applications. I'm sure that's true. But again, as far as being concerned about losing IRS status, no, that wasn't an issue because frankly, we had already sent in the form to that group exemption to the IRS about our members, indicating that NERFA was on there, as we do every year. We could remove them if they didn't send us our information, but we won't do that until we have sometimes a couple of years of data that we're not receiving from organizations, which we have had in the past. And frankly, there also has been a region who lost their tax exemption status because they did not fill out the paper or did not fill out 990 for 3 years. And that's when we started to realize, oh crap, this is an issue. We need to look closer than what we have. And I think that's on Folk Alliance for not looking as closely as we did, or assuming that the information was correct that was being sent to us when it wasn't. And that's when I believe in 2017, when we started to realize, looking closer and deeper into NERFA, that there were some issues back in 2017 and prior to 2017. I also want to say that I am baffled by why we're talking about 2019. we're done. It's over with. Let's move forward. Like, I'm just so confused why all this is going on and why there's so much strife in this community. We are a community, folks. And I love this community. I've been with Folk Alliance for over 10 years. And I'm so impressed with all the people that are here, that are working together. I know that things have not been, that some people felt like left out, yeah, I mean, it's just like, there's so much, it's so baffling to me that we're in these arguments and that we're saying such negative things about each other online. It's disheartening. It is truly disheartening. And I just wish that we would find a way to work together. And Rob, I'm going to say to you, and I'm going to say it here, what you're doing is disruptive. The words that you are using go against our membership values.
Yeah,
And
I think
really
somebody-
disappointed in
Yeah,
some of
sure.
the stuff that you're doing.
Go ahead,
Because
then I'll
it's just,
respond.
Please don't interrupt, Jen.
It's
Ask
No, I
just-
won't. Go
done.
ahead, and then I'll
He's
respond.
done.
What I said.
the
Yep.
way that we are personally attacking people, it's not okay. We can't do this. This is not how we treat each other in community, folks. Like, let's be more respectful towards each other, and let's value the time that these board members have done. Has Justin done some stuff that was wrong? I'm sure he has. No one's denying that. I love Justin, and there are times where he drives me crazy too. But I know he's ultimately not a bad. I love Justin. He's a good person. I don't run NERFA. NERFA is their own board. But I'm impressed with what the board of NERFA has been doing. I am thankful that people have stepped up to be on the ballot. I think that's awesome. I'm excited to see that there's actually an election this year, because the bylaws of NERFA do not allow that unless someone actually steps up. That's the way that it's written. And I'm going to stop talking, but I'm going to stop talking. But I really appreciate all you that are here today, and I hope we can find a way to move forward.
Okay, I just want to make really clear then, and I'll respond really briefly. I have not attacked anyone or called anyone a name. What I've done is I've spoke to the professional resume of someone who's on the board of directors and the behavior of that person totally factually. I don't know Justin. I've never met him in person. I've had one interaction with him. He might be the greatest guy in the world. He might be someone that I love to talk movies with. But we're talking about professional competence and professional behavior. And I think it's a completely appropriate discussion to have. And
You're making assumptions based on information that you may or may not have. That's harmful about a job that he no longer has, and it's harmful.
I have the letter. I'll be submitting it to you and to the board. So then the board will make those decisions based on the facts. I have that letter. So again, I'm not making assumptions. This is all factual. Everything is 100% factual here. And again, I have no axe to grind here. As Cheryl said, we have a problem where we're in a bad situation where we need to move forward. And I am making a case on behalf of, not myself, 128 people who signed a petition and many more, that we need to move forward in a professional way. So this is not, you need to understand, this is not emotional for me. I've been a professional for a lot of years. This is about professional competence and moving the organization forward in a way that serves us all. And I just want you all to know that there is no angle here for me. I have nothing to gain here. I have way more to lose. And the only other thing I'm going to add is we just found out in the last couple of minutes that a person who spoke up and has now turned out to be 100% true was threatened with legal action and shut down. And no one has said anything about potentially apologizing for that. And that is not our culture. That is not the way we behave towards people. We don't hurt people and harm people and then not apologize or not acknowledge our mistakes. And I'm done talking. Thank you.
Matt, do you want to respond to that, or would you like me to? Because one of us needs to.
You should.
Okay. So first of all, Rob, you used language like the vise is closing in your discussion online. I don't know what that means to you, But that's certainly not in keeping with the kind of language I would use to anyone, period. And that's just one of many. There's so many things like that I can point to. I'm not going to because I'm not interested in engaging in that. I will say this.
Say it, but you don't want to
Right.
engage in it. Go ahead.
Excuse me. I will say this. When the situation happened where Jen and Kathy Sands approached me at Falcon Ridge, I spent well over an hour speaking with them, answering every question they had, and offering to share information with them. I then went home and I sent them the actual 990s that were in my possession so they could see that we had put the information about Ethan's income, about tribal mischief, right on those 990s. I then made sure that the following year's 990 was put on our website so people could view it for themselves. I recognize that Jen and other people who may have seen the 990s, that although most of them weren't available for the longest time, because I kept looking on the IRS site, so I could point people to them. They weren't on the IRS site until fairly recently, and the 2022 is still not on the IRS site. I don't know how GuideStar and other places got it before the IRS posted it, but they did. But we had no way to look at any of this. What happened with Jen was that after we had given all of the information we had, she continued to go out there, and we got questions and concerns from community members for quite some time about the things that she was saying. And each time we reached out to the person and explained and shared the documentation that we had if they wanted it, and told them what was going on. And we asked Jen to please stop doing this. We asked repeatedly. The only reason we got to the point where we ended up writing a letter saying we'll have to take legal action is because as a member of a board of directors, you have a fiduciary responsibility. Sometimes
Dan,
that's
let me
not.
take
Sometimes
this
that's
one.
not done. You can't always. If you've tried to reach out to someone and have them stop something, you have a responsibility to the organization. You cannot allow someone to spread information about that. Matt, you want to jump in, you can.
I do. The reason that I finally came on board of sending that letter was when when Jen started using terms like embezzling and money laundering and thievery. Folks, I'm the CEO of a financial company, and I am de facto a fiduciary by holding a position on this board. If somebody uses the term embezzlement as it pertains to me, that is a serious problem that actually threatens my company and the job security of every single person that works for me. So when the concern grew to a point that those types of words were being used, money laundering, that's where I said to the board, now this has to stop. And if the board doesn't do anything, that's fine, but I'm going to have to take legal action because the security of my firm was could have been questioned. That is a very, very serious word to use. And by the way, in my industry, it's kind of guilty until proven innocent so that you can protect the consumer. So when words like embezzlement and money laundering and thievery began to be used, that's when we had to send a letter.
So Matt, I've got two questions for you. I guess the first one is, and again, I'm not going to be emotional about this.
Carol Ann has her hand up. Is someone moderating this in a way that?
Yes, I
should be
apologize.
respectful? So,
Cheryl, yes.
So Rob, I think if you want to speak, why don't you raise your hand? Carol Ann has had her hand raised. She has been respectful.
Yes, please, Carol Ann, go ahead.
Thank you.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. I would like to go back to what I'm backpedaling for a moment, and then I'll address what Mr. Raymer just said, but Jennifer, thank you for being here. For starters, we haven't met in person, but thank you for being here, and thank you for expressing what you just expressed, and thank you for saying you don't understand why this is all happening. Rob spoke to the professional aspect of mistrust of Justin and of authority in general at NERFA for the past few years. But I would like to speak to the personal side of it. I don't know Justin either. I have had very few interactions with Justin. I know him. I know his name. He knows my name. He says hello to me. My interactions with him were limited to my role as the Guerrilla Private Showcase keeper for 6 years. He was always the last person to send me his stuff. He was in charge of the Philly Folk Song Society room. He was always last, and I had to badger him to get things. But that is my only interaction. It's not terrible. But I will tell you that since this whole thing started, since I stepped forward and said we need to have elections this year, and since I put myself forward to be part of that, people have written me, called me, sent me private messages about their interactions with Justin. And they're not calling me to tell me how wonderful he is. They're calling me to tell me about insulting things that he has said to them, ways in which he has hurt them, cut them down, lost their trust. And that is why this is all happening. Because, as you know, as Cheryl said, this is folk music, and as others have said this evening, this is folk music. We're supposed to trust each other. And when that trust breaks down, when there's nasty crap flowing right out of Justin and smacking people in the face over and over and over again, not me personally, but lots of people that I have spoken to, when that happens over and over and over again, what the language Rob is using is not exactly how I would say things, but his way of expressing himself is mild in comparison to the things that I have heard from people in the ways that they have been hurt by Justin Nordell. So I will say, I hardly know him, but I don't trust him, and it builds, drop that. The second thing I would like to say is what I'm also hearing tonight from Mr. Raymer and from others is blaming, we're pointing fingers at Rob, we're pointing fingers at Genevieve for being the people who are calling out things that they see that are wrong, and that's victim blaming, and that's just not cool, you guys. That's just not cool. Can we bring it back to the point and talk about why we're here? Thank you, Cheryl Prashker, for saying why we were here in the first place, and for suggesting that perhaps if Justin Nordell had a shred of decency in him, he would step down and all this would go away. He can stay in the community. He's a great cheerleader. Stay in the community, Justin, but step down and all this will go away. That's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
If I may respond to that, Ethan, before I know there's another hand up. I am not blaming Jen for tax returns. I am not blaming Jen for bringing up what is a legitimate concern. I will, however, blame anybody for accusing me of laundering money. And I just want to make a distinction between the two. We did provide to Jen everything we had and confirm with the CPA, and all of that has been addressed. But I just want to be clear that my issue was with the terms that were being used, because this was not about tax returns. This was about accusing people of crimes.
Mm-hmm.
That was the distinction. Now, the other
just so you know, it never trickled down to me. I've never heard anybody say that about
okay, well, that's good.
Or anyone else. Those
brings
criminal
me to
terms have
peace.
never been used. It was just the mistrust. Whatever she said, I wasn't there.
Let's just be clear. Those terms were used, but I'm very happy to hear that they were not widespread.
No, but you're behaving
is,
as though it spread to the whole community and everybody was in danger. No one heard that, but the people who were in the room at the time. I don't know how many of them there were. I'm not saying it was the right thing for her to say, but you know.
Listen,
it may not be as widespread as you think.
Hold on. Listen, we need to have a little bit of more respect for each other. Rob has his hand up. Ethan has his hand up. Ethan, you haven't spoken, and then Rob, you can speak.
Primarily, I was jumping in and going to say what Matt was saying. However, I would also, and Jen Rowe, you're welcome to state this as well. When the claim of NERFA misusing funds was made, it was made to NERFA, and NERFA provided the details and the financials in detail of everything that was submitted, everything that was went to the accountant to file. At which point Genevieve went to FAI, making similar claims. FAI reviewed the financials, as it is their annual process to do and was given the same information. This wasn't a silent claim, Carol Ann. You may not have heard it, but it was made loudly and in many places. And that's why it is being addressed. I appreciate that you didn't hear it, but us addressing something that's been made public is not victim blaming or shutting things down. This is what we're here for. If people are saying that there is a belief and or a lack of trust because they've heard these things, and these things are factually inaccurate and can be shown that, which we have heard. Rob has stated multiple times in the text that these are things that have been stated and have heard. He has repeated these many, many, many times.
That's not what I said. I wasn't
don't-
talking about that. I was talking about the claims that people have come to me about Justin. Had nothing whatsoever to do with Genevieve. I just
I
wanted
was
to say
referring
that.
to the
And you
next
didn't-
phase where you referred
Right.
to her as victim blaming. That was very
Sure. Well, it
specific
is
to what you
victim.
said.
It is, but it is.
I
It-
did,
Oh.
just to verify, I did talk to Genevieve in looking at my calendar and emails in August of 2022 about her concerns. I have no idea when the letter was sent to her, if it was before or after that date. But I did have a conversation with her specific to the 990 and 990s and NERFA financials, which frankly at that time, and nor do I have any concerns right now. I did not have concerns with the information in the 990s.
Okay, let's let Rob speak again, and then I
Yeah.
have a few things I want to say.
Yeah, just a couple of things. So first of all, this is not a public company. This is not a corporation. This is a member organization. And members need to be able to raise concerns and speak candidly. I do know that Genevieve asked specifically for examples of what she was doing that was damaging. And according to her, and I don't want to speak for her, you can speak to her. But according to what I've heard, those were not provided. So if there were specific things, Matt, where somehow this was causing slander or this was causing some kind of attack on somebody's personal or professional credibility, then certainly bring that up. Let's see that email. Let's see that video. Let's see that evidence of that, right? I don't think anybody would object to seeing that. I frankly don't think it exists. I think that someone was having private conversations and people were offended by it or however annoyed by it, and they targeted an individual, and that individual turned out to be correct, turned out to be 100% correct, as has been admitted tonight. And I still have not heard a single person use the word apology. So again, this is about our culture. It's about a culture of openness and transparency and not retaliating against people who ask awkward questions. And ironically, I am not on NERFA Talk right now. Why? Because I asked for a clarification of the policy, right? So I got kicked off of NERFA Talk because I asked for a clarification of the policy of what was appropriate. Guys, this is a pattern. It's a pattern of defensiveness. It's a pattern of lack of transparency. It's a pattern of not admitting things until you absolutely have to. And I'm sorry, but that is not our culture. And Dan, you have stepped up and you've taken the brunt of a lot of this. None of this was directed at you. None of it. It was directed at that culture. It was directed at the actions that have happened because of the president of the board. It's about the resume and the fact that this is a pattern of behavior over many, many years as a professional. That's what it's about. And that's what it's going to continue to be about. This is not emotional. This is not personal. So, we can talk about, I don't dislike any of you. It's not my nature to dislike people.
Oh, okay.
But, okay, so I'm going to stop and you can go ahead and address this, but we should apologize. We should admit we made mistakes and we should apologize. And that's the bottom line.
Okay. Cheryl, I'm going to let you speak before me because I'm probably going to take a little while. So go ahead. You got to unmute though, because otherwise, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, normally I don't have a lot of problems being heard. First off, I've spent over an hour of my time tonight on a divisive, angry, rant fest. I don't even know what to call it. In a community that I deeply love, with people that I've known for decades. This whole thing is so awful. And to watch it play out on Facebook, and you suck, no, you suck, you're lying, no, you're lying, you're a bad person, no, you're an even worse person. It's ridiculous, and it doesn't help anything. So there are differences of opinion, there are differences of priority, there are personalities, but fundamentally, I think we all agree that we want the music to survive and thrive. We want singer-songwriters to have venues to make music, to be able to afford music as a living. We want venues to stay open. We want DJs to continue to advertise the music. I mean, I think fundamentally our values are the same. And to spend an hour and a quarter now, and the meeting is not over yet, arguing about a tax return error from 4 years ago or 5 years ago or 6 years ago with someone who either made a mistake or didn't, or something who's not in the room to defend themselves. I just don't even understand. At some point, and Jen Rowe, you said this beautifully, at some point, like, can we just push the pause button and talk about what the 2024 NERFA should look like in Portland, Oregon, and what the finance is, if this is a financial call? Why are we going to Portland? Is it cheaper? Is it better? How's it going to be for folks? What are some new ideas people have? And where's it going to be in 25? And how are we going to make sure we're bringing new and diverse people and venues and folks in 24, 25, 26? That's what I want to hear. That's what we should be doing. Let there be an election. Let people vote. Make sure you return your ballot. Make sure your voice is heard. But bottom line, whoever gets elected is going to be in charge of shepherding this organization into the future. Could we please, fucking A, stop tearing each other down and stop obsessing about the past? That's my rant for the evening. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. As Cheryl Prasker said, the other Cheryl, one of the other Cheryls. Thank you, Dan, for your leadership, your expertise, your love. Matt, thank you for bringing your professionalism. Thank you to everyone for being in this room and caring about NERFA enough to be in this room and to give of your time. Can we please lower the temperature and look into the future? Thank you.
And
Thanks, Cheryl.
thank you, Cheryl. To that end, I just want to sort of go all the way back to the beginning, because there was really like 4 things that we wanted to accomplish. A lot of talk about Justin tonight, and there's a vote out right there. There's a vote out there right now to remove him from the board. And for those of you who feel that he is unqualified or don't like his professional demeanor, by all means, cast your vote, and have all your friends that agree with you cast a vote. That's why we vote. That's not really what this meeting was about, but nonetheless, let's acknowledge that right now there is a vote to remove Justin Nordell. The purpose of this meeting was to disband any concern that the IRS had threatened to revoke our nonprofit status, or that our nonprofit status was at risk from the IRS's perspective. It is not. That our tax exempt status was at risk or threatened by FAI. It was not. And to bring some new information about the 2022 tax return. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands probably the most important thing about the 2022 tax return. What we gave to our accountant was correct and done properly. And what our accountant submitted to the aggregator was correct and done properly. If somebody wants to hear an apology that somewhere between the aggregator and the IRS, the data got screwed up from a company that we don't even know who they are, that we didn't hire, sure, I apologize for that. But I want to make sure that everybody in the community understands that there is a difference between an error that we finally were able to find and intentional financial ill will. And to Cheryl's point, I hope that this uncovers at least a part of what actually happens, because I don't want anybody to think that anything was done improperly from our side or even our accountants. And I also want to give a shout out to Cheryl, because even though the software she was using was old, there was a, oh, I'm sorry, the former president, I'm sorry.
You mean Diane? Diane?
I'm sorry, Diane. It's too late for me. But anyway, shout out to Diane, because she kept all those records in software. It was old and it created a problem. And I also want to give. I hope the board doesn't crush me for this, but hey, look, Rob. Kudos to you for bringing up legitimate concerns. I can't say I agree with how you've handled those concerns, but I want to give a shout out to you about raising concerns. We are a nonprofit. We do have taxes to file, and we need to make sure that we are compliant. To conclude this comment, the 2019 lateness was a half of a decade ago. There was not a penny of repercussions for it. There was no financial harm. Nothing came about it. And it was a half a decade ago. 2020, 21, 22 were filed on time. We're going to figure out more about 22, 23 is about to be filed. So hopefully after this, we can vote on Justin, file our 2023 taxes, and enjoy some music, man. That's my hope.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I need to back up just for a second, because there are a couple of things still hanging out there that I think need to be addressed. When you have a compassionate community like ours, where people really care about people, especially people who may be, not cared about in a large part of our society. When you have a community like that, we are all quick to feel, the need to support people who we feel are being wronged, and we've recognized in all of this that's been going on that's part of the underlying motivation for a lot of people who have signed the petition, who've been involved in this. However, that isn't exactly what happened, and that's part of our problem with this. Like when you ask for apologies and you ask for for why haven't we been more receptive, why haven't we been more transparent and open and sensitive to the community, we are trying to balance out somehow here the things that we needed to do to protect the organization and the organization's reputation. This isn't about any individual people on our board trying to protect themselves. We're all in a lot of pain, if the truth be known. This has been very, very difficult. This is about the organization. And the problem with what's been happening is that it damages the organization. I know the intentions are positive. I really believe that. But the damage to the organization, you talk about why have we lost so many members? Well, there's actually, I saw that in the chat and I want to address that for a second. That is partly, in probably a fairly small part of our drop in numbers. Our drop in numbers is because everyone got crushed by a freaking pandemic and venues closed and musicians decided not to continue their careers and everyone is financially challenged. And there are just a million issues we've been trying to deal with to keep this organization sustainable, to make sure that it can get into the future. And the unfortunate outcome of what's happened is that, we were kind of stretching it to try and make that happen as it was. And unfortunately, this whole situation has made it harder, not easier. I know the intentions are good, but for those of us working every day to try and sustain it, it has not helped us. And we need your help.
Dan, can I talk about the numbers?
Sure.
I just want to, I know there's been concerns about losing attendance to NERFA. And just to be transparent, everyone has lost numbers. Folk Alliance, our first conference back, we were almost a third of where we were before the pandemic, or slightly above a third. This past year in 2023, we had 2/3 the number of attendees that we had, or a little bit less than 2/3 of the number of attendees that we had in 2020, the January 2020. And this upcoming year, we are about that same number, a little bit less than 2/3 of the number that we had in 2020. So this is not unique to NERFA at all. This is the reality of coming back from the pandemic and the reality of the cost of being an artist and the cost of working in this industry. We're not back to normal. It's just the reality. That's all I wanted to say. And as far as the other regional conferences, Michael, to your point, some of them are absolutely back. I don't know if it's because they're smaller numbers. That's quite possible. We're not comparing apples to apples either. But most are still struggling.
I'm watching the chat. It's this feeling that we're being treated as the other here. For those of you who are kind of continuing to drum the drum in the background here of the chat, we get it. We get it. It's going to take a lot to have, what we're doing be sustainable. And let's not be disingenuous. I don't even know how to respond, Rob. I'm not going to say anything else. If do people have any more comments about the finances that I can? No.
Ethan's had his hand up for quite some time.
Okay,
actually.
go ahead, Ethan. I can't.
If typing's the method I have, I'll do.
Rob, yeah, so I meet with the other regions pretty regularly. SERFA did have a bit of a bump, but it was a bump of about 200 to 220 or 230 people, which isn't negative. That's a fantastic bump. That's a 15% increase, but comparative to 700 where we were before the conference to 400 where we were directly after the conference, it isn't apples to apples. SWRFA still hasn't recovered. They're still not at the numbers they want. I met with Dallas and Andrew about that. We've had that conversation. Far West had to cancel a conference, and it has has played havoc with their organization. They've lost the vast majority of their board, and they don't really, and I say this with complete respect to them, but they're doing their best to try to find a way to bounce back from this, just enabled to keep the lights on. Farm's done a fantastic job, and though people like Charlie and now Ellen get a lot of that credit, Annie Capps was miraculous for that organization. But out of all of the regions for the first year, they were the only ones that came back ahead. Everyone else is working on it. And SERFA, to some people's points, yep, they're above where they were. They were also the smallest. They were the smallest pizza from a numbers game. They simply were. There were 200 people versus SWRFA at about 320, Far West at about 350, and Farm at about 350. So we track these numbers, and that's not my way of trying to be defensive. It's my way of just looking at, and we all meet regularly to talk about this and to talk about strategy. So this is just something I want people to be aware of. This is not unique, and to state it in that way isn't entirely correct, especially considering we used to have 100 to 140 of our attendees were house show presenters. We all know factually that over 50% of all house show presenters are no longer house show presenters. We did the survey. So we know we're losing 65 people no matter what, because they don't exist anymore. And that's a really depressing stat. And we've been working with people, and we had peer groups, and we started peer groups. NERFA never had coordinated peer groups as part of the programming prior to 2022. We had informal ones. The DJs got together, they ran that on their own. Some of the house shows got together, they ran it on their own. Now we're having group discussions on this stuff and talking about experiences and going over surveys and trying to understand how we can support and build the communities and even look at new opportunities instead of going back to old ones. So I apologize. I don't mean any of that defensively. I mean that entirely factually. And we're doing our best to understand what is working and what isn't working. And specifically as it relates to this year's conference, while the numbers were down, the diversity was amazing. We had Indigenous artists from Canada. We had artists of other colors as a percentage that wasn't single digit in our formal presentation. We had a Christian drag queen on the formal showcase. We had so many different voices, and we're really proud of that. And we opened the doors and we made space and we gave those people a place to be. So I just wanted to throw that out there. This is not lost on us. It's not something that we don't spend an awful lot of time trying to figure out how we can be more inviting. And we're going to do our best to keep doing that. And I'll leave it at that. And Mara, you have your hand up. And it wouldn't be a meeting if we didn't call on you at least once. So
Oh, thank you,
go for
Ethan. I appreciate that. I want to say something as lovingly as I can, because I love this community and I've been coming for a number of years. I want to speak to both sides of it, because when Justin was on the board and Ethan, when you were there, I did feel welcome at that time. I felt very welcome and I had lots of great opportunities. I've been, however, in a position where I was personally feeling bullied and intimidated by Justin in another organization while he was president. And it wasn't done it was never done in a mean-spirited kind of conversation, but in such a way that I felt that if I spoke up, that my position might be in question, as it were. And that's a very, to try to tell people like Cheryl Kagan and others who don't seem to understand what people are feeling. I'm speaking from my own personal experience. And I also witnessed other friends of mine have much worse things happen to them. That letter that was read at the last meeting, I urge you folks to read the letter, Jennifer Rowe to read the letter, to understand that no one is trying to turn Justin into a victim. And I will speak from my own personal experience. Again, I don't have to relate specifically, unless you want me to, the things that I experienced. I'm just sharing with you that I experienced them. And just because I experienced them as a member of another organization, I was still a member of NERFA, and so was Justin. Justin was still the president of NERFA. His mother was the president of Folk Alliance and in charge of the Philly Folk Festival. So I was made to feel that if I stepped out of line, that potentially, my professional self could be at risk. And it wasn't ever said in a specific way, but it was done in a way where I understood it. And to come forward and speak is very, very difficult. And the reason I feel that I need to is because I don't want to see other people hurt in that way. And I'm speaking not from anger, from sorrow. Because when I was going through this situation and observed friends of mine going through even worse, I felt powerless and helpless. I couldn't do anything to help. So now I'm sitting at home. I don't know if I'll have a career. Maybe it's okay. Maybe I can be brave. But I recorded a song called By My Silence, written by Ellen Buxtell and Nick Annis. If I stay silent, I allow it to continue. So I hope that you understand. It was difficult for me to speak. I love the community. I felt very welcomed into the community by you, Ethan, by Justin, maybe more so than I did from the previous administration. I had wonderful opportunities. But I also have been on the other side of it. It can't continue. And I urge folks, look at what happened at Philly. Look at what's happening at NERFA. Look at what's happening right now at OhioCon. Right now. Go look at what's happening right now at OhioCon. That's what I need to say. And I say it out of love. I don't say it out of hate. Justin's given me wonderful opportunities. Ethan, you've given me wonderful opportunities. And I love the community. So if I can reach you through my emotion, and I'm usually not an emotional person. Everybody knows me. I'm very direct and, to the point and factual. but it's very emotional. The reason I've been so diligent presenting the facts is because it's the only thing I know how to do that might make a difference without trying to impugn someone's personality. I don't know what else to do. And I hope that it helps some of you who don't understand to understand what it's like to be on that other side. When you're a good person and you've tried your hardest to do everything right and you're fearful. That's what I need to say. And it's hard to say it. I don't want to hurt somebody else. So that's what I have to say. I love the community. I love all of you. I don't want it to be this way. I don't know if I can make a difference. I'm really trying to make a difference. I'm trying so hard. I don't know another way. I appreciate you letting me speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. You know, I'm kind of grateful to hear what you're sharing. You know, it's hard sometimes when you're just seeing, especially social media, which is just so bad for all of us. You know, when you see the things that are posted, it's just like out of context. It's lacking the information that we need as human beings to make decisions and you know, do the right thing in our lives. It is unfortunately been destructive to us, destructive to our society, and continues to be. We do have, you know, things in place for just the kind of thing that you have experienced, Mara. And I really want to encourage people to use that. You know, we have a SAFE committee for a reason, you know, and that I understand.
But
that,
Justin,
right. But
I don't know
you
if you
can
can hear me.
say to us, listen, if anyone came to us at any point in time and said,
Not safe,
listen,
Dan. It's not safe.
Not
It's
safe.
not safe. We're trying to make you understand that it is not safe. And you
well,
can't seem to grasp it. It is not safe. And all we can say is it's not safe. And that's all.
I need you to be more specific with us so that we do understand. The SAFE committee is made up of a whole group of people from this
But
community.
Justin is on the SAFE committee.
No, he's
that's
not.
what. Well,
No,
he
he's
was.
not.
He was at the beginning.
When we didn't have a SAFE committee, he de facto had to serve as that in the very beginning.
Well,
that was, as we were trying to
everybody was afraid to come forward. Listen, I'm just going to speak for myself as well. The reason I stepped away from NERFA as I did so abruptly is that I had the same issues, and I have been at the other end of the angry Justin, because he does have an angry side. And Diane was written, you know, emails that were like, you know, oh, Diane, don't you think you should up your meds because you really aren't yourself like you used to be, and things like that, like stuff like that. And the reason, I will tell you, the reason I'm running for the board now, because people have asked me to do it before, is, believe it or not, is because I knew I wasn't going to have to be in the same room with Justin. I would only have to be on Zoom calls. That's how afraid I am, or that's how much he affects me. I can't be in the same room with him. And so I thought to myself, oh, you know what? If I only have to be on a Zoom call with him, it won't be so bad. Doesn't that tell you something?
Yes. And my thinking, and of course, this is all off the top of our heads at this point, you know, you'll probably be elected to the board, Cheryl, and there are other people here who share concerns. We're always looking for members of this community, you know, of this committee, of the SAFE committee. So one of the ways to address this is for some of you to, you know, volunteer to be on the SAFE committee so that you can transform it into what it's supposed to be. Since you say that it hasn't felt like a safe place for you, please step forward, because it's an important thing to have in the community so that people who you know are feeling the way that Mara is feeling and that you're feeling, Cheryl, have a place to go. You know, we have assumed, I will say, as a board, all along throughout this process, that people had confidence in that committee because it's been around for a while and it's worked pretty well in dealing with things in the past. So, you know, join it. I mean, that's what I would say. Please, you know, step forward and be a part of it. Cheryl, did you have your hand up? Cheryl,
Natalia has her hand.
Oh, Natalia. Okay, go ahead, Natalia.
Oh, I wanted to just offer a closing maybe in 10 minutes. I see Amy has a really good, important question in the chat, and then just cognizant of people's time and to share a sparkly moment is that Ethan and I were on a call 12 hours ago. So we've been doing NERFA for 12 hours today. With the registrations almost ready to go. So, you know, we are moving forward, and I'm hearing everyone, and I do want to offer a small closing to try to move some of this after we address a few more of these points.
Yeah, we did promise, Natalia, that we'd stay on as long as people wanted to today, because we've kind of said to people in the past few meetings, hey, we have to have a sharp cutoff at a particular time, but we also don't want
Well,
people to
understood.
burn
I just wanted to remind folks that we do have a community meeting on February 5th, and this was particularly a financial meeting, and all of these concerns really need all of the airtime. Let's bring it back to, I like Amy's question about circling back to the financial context of tonight's meeting. I don't believe we have yet heard the context of compensation to Ethan and tribal mischief reporting inconsistencies. Can we?
Okay. Do people want me to get into that for a bit and talk about it? And then if we want to come back to some of these things, I'm certainly happy to stay on, and anyone else who wants to, as long as people have things they need to talk about. So here's the situation with the financial compensation. I mean, Matt kind of said it at the beginning, but I want to clarify how these things are done. So when someone is a key employee, like your executive director, like Ethan is, or when someone is on your board of directors and they receive any kind of compensation, you're required by law to report it on your 990. There's a particular section 4 of the 990, where you report it. Some of the confusion at the beginning, before, when I was first approached about this, was about when it gets reported. And that can get kind of complicated when you have a fiscal year that isn't the same as a calendar year. And that was NERFA's situation way back at the beginning of when Ethan started working for us. We still had a fiscal year that was different from the calendar year. So when you report on the 990, it says specifically in the instructions that the amount you report for your executive compensation has to be based on the calendar year tax reporting, even if you're in a fiscal year. So for example, when we had the 2021 990 and we were filling it out, all that would get reported on that 2021 calendar year 990 would be the income that Ethan Baird had collected in the calendar year of 2020. So that creates some confusion because he earned this much amount of money with us, and it looks like only part of it was reported, but that's what the form requires. So that you and I explained this way back when I was talking to Kathy and Jen initially. This is the way it gets reported. So what also complicated for us in the beginning of this whole process was that happened to be the year that we also changed our fiscal year. So we had the 2021 form, and in that year, in 2020, Ethan had just started as executive director and only earned $2,500 because we're paying $1,250 a month to him to be our executive director. He only earned $2,500 in that 2020 calendar year. So that's what was reported on our 2020.
2,500 or 25,000?
2,500, $1,250 a month was all he earned in 2021. Then in the short year of 21, right, the July 1st to December 31st, in our short year, that was when we contracted for the first time with Tribal Mischief to run our online conference. And so the income that was reported for that period was what we paid Tribal Mischief in that period, which was something around $25,000. And I can show you the 990s. You really want to, I'll share them on my screen and I'll show you where we report them. Actually, I will do that. But let me finish the story first and I'll show you each of the 990s. So that was the short year of the end of 2021, from July 1st to December 31st. Then came 2022. In 2022, and I've probably bored all of you enough with this, explaining it the last two community meetings if you were there. But in 2022, when we contracted with Tribal Mischief, we did so because we needed highly skilled people, and there was no way we were going to get those people to work part-time for the kind of wages we were paying, to get people who had the kind of video editing expertise and communications expertise. You can ask if you want. Kimberly Sinclair, who was on our board, was one of the people working for Tribal Mischief that year. She told me repeatedly how she was getting paid half as much as she usually got paid for the same things that she did for other organizations. And she was happy to contribute that to NERFA, but that was the reality. We were paying people, a fraction of what those things would have cost us. So we contracted with Tribal Mischief to do that because they were able to offer some of those people more than part-time employment, and that allowed us to have their expertise, even though we weren't paying them for full-time employment. So we did that with them, and that entire amount, which was $60,600, which was for 3 part-time employees and Ethan as executive director, and Ethan again that year only earned $15,000 as executive director. The rest of the money went directly to the employees and to to some of the supports that are needed to have employees. So, there were certain expenses that Tribal Mischief had, but basically it was a win-win for NERFA, and it was all reported. Now let me share my screen and I'll show you all the 990s so everyone can say you saw them, because I would really appreciate you seeing them, so that when people ask you about these forms, you have at least seen what we sent in. We've already acknowledged that may not be what's appearing on the site of any of these places that get their forms from the IRS. I have no idea, perfectly pure transparency here, no idea how long this will take to clear up. No idea. Probably what will happen is the IRS will insist we send an amended return, even though it was something in their system. It's something in the whole software system that gets it there. But we will probably be required to send amended returns for all 3 of these years, which will be exactly the same as what I'm showing you now. Just to be clear, and anyone can have these. Happy to email them to you. We're not trying to keep them secret. They're our forms. So I'm going to share the screen and show you the 990s. Okay. Here's the first one. Can everyone see this? This is what it looks like. This is the year from 2019 to 2020. And this is the year that Ethan earned $2,500 that I was just describing to you. Okay, this is that year. And there you can see this is the list of officers, trustees, and key employees. And there's the $2,500 for Ethan. Okay, I'm going to switch. I think I can do this. Tell me if this appears on your screen now. Do you see the 2021, or did I mess this up? Yes, you do. Okay. So we scroll down on the 2021 to where the officers and thing. You'll see Ethan Baird, $25,366. That was the year we did the online conference, and the year that we first contracted with Tribal Mischief. So that includes what was Ethan's, wages for those 6 months from July 1st to December 31st, and the amount that we paid Tribal Mischief. So if you do the math, 7,500 of it, half of that was half a year's salary for Ethan. It was getting paid $15,000 a year. It was 7,500, and then the rest of it was for the implementation of the conference. And I have shared this before, but just so people are aware, one of the reasons that we contracted with Tribal Mischief was because they were willing to do a contract with us where they did not get paid in full unless we had a certain amount of income at the conference. So they were protecting NERFA from having a potential loss. And we did not pay them the final $4,000 we had agreed to until after the conference, and after we saw that we had met the registration amounts that we had hoped for in the conference. So that was that year. here is the big year that everyone's been talking about, 21-22, which is when we contracted the tribal mischief and we had all those employees. If you look down, here's Ethan Baird with $60,600. Now, I'll tell you something about this. I was very uncomfortable with reporting it this way because this was not all Ethan's salary, right? This was all the money that went into tribal mischief, and we were actually paying 3 other people. But what the government requires is that this figure is based on the 1099 that we sent to Ethan Baird in that year. And the entire amount, since it was his company and we were paying him through tribal mischief, the entire amount needed to be reported as Ethan's income. I had a long back and forth with the accountant from Donnelly's firm that was doing this that year about the fact that the community had expressed concerns about our contract with tribal mischief, and couldn't we somehow break this down? And the accountant, and I'm happy to share the emails if you want me to, but the accountant basically told me, don't do that. That will draw attention to your organization from the IRS. And, you know, you don't want unwanted attention from the IRS. They want to see that that figure matches the 1099 that you sent that is on file for them with that person. So leave it the way it is. And I left it the way it was, but unfortunately, it didn't, you know, it resulted in some lack of clarity for people. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop there.
I also had... I'm sorry, Dan, let me just grab in there. I also had concerns about this because I was like, this makes it look like this is Ethan's salary. So I called our firm's accountant and my personal account to be like, is there any way that we can do this in a manner that shows the community that not all this is going to this guy, Ethan? And all of them were like, no, unfortunately, you have to do it this way. And they were like, I understand how it might look, you know, like something different's happening. Like somebody might look at this who doesn't understand this and might be like, yes, they would think you're paying Ethan $60,000, but it has to be done this way. Just wanted to back Dan up on that. Dan, you're muted.
I just want to add that I was so concerned about this that I described all of it in my financial report, both the one that I presented at the annual meeting that year and in the written one that's been on our website. So when I get frustrated or the organization seems to get frustrated with the continuing kind of repetition of things that we've said are not accurate or not, you know, not describing the situation as it actually occurred, it's because we put the information out there. People say you're not transparent, but I literally wrote it in a report and put it on our website so anyone could read it, where it describes all this. And I don't know what else to do. I mean, I'm doing this, but this is the reality of the reporting. And I'm going to repeat what I've said at every general meeting for the last couple of years, which is Ethan Baird is getting paid a fraction of what he should get paid for what he's doing for the organization. And I have serious concerns for the organization, not for Ethan Baird, for the organization, that we don't recognize that, because we have to be able to sustain this. And when Ethan Baird leaves, we have not set up a situation where it's sustainable. You know, we need to have the kind of funding that will allow us to actually hire someone to do what Ethan's doing and pay them what we expect. Or the only people we will be able to get are people who want to do the job and may or may not have the skills, because the really skilled people are not going to come on for what Ethan Baird is doing. So that's a dilemma we have. Joel, you've been very patient, and I'm going to call on you to please speak.
Very easy to be patient when the explanation keeps clarifying things. But I want to get one thing clear in my mind on the accounting, because what was just said recently and the documents you showed, this is just one small piece of it. But I remember back in the 70s when we were independent bands and we were actually making a living. And with the contracts we might sign with a club to be the house band for an entire year, the money went to the contractor, and then the contractor issued 990s to each of the band members So what we're seeing there, if it had said Tribal Mischief instead of Ethan Baird, and then another set of 1099s parsed it out, that's where the cash actually flowed. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, but we couldn't do it that way because we had to, Ethan Bear, I mean, that would have been a lack of transparency. If we had not put Ethan Scott Baird on there and instead put Tribal Mischief on it, that would have been different from what we reported to the government on the 1099. And it would have, because it's in Ethan Baird's name. So, that he does business as Tribal Mischief, but the 1099 that we sent is in Ethan Baird's name. So we needed to make sure we were consistent with what was being reported to the government on the 1099.
Great. So to make sure I understand it correctly, the IRS sees those two things and it matches. So they go, great, let's go look for something that's actually wrong someplace else. We've got a quota. We're supposed to make money too. Then they go over,
like that.
then they go over to Ethan Baird's thing and they see that amount come in. And then they see it matches the total number of 1099s representing each person who did a piece of the work. And they match those two up. And if the totals of all the individuals on his form matches the amount that was sent to him, they go, great, this matches. And then they go looking someplace else.
Well, they wouldn't have done that, but I hear what you're saying.
Well, they
theoretically, because Ethan, we were contracting with his company, and we were giving the money to them. It's up to him to send 1099s to his employees and
right. That's what I meant. So they look at his as a freestanding, separate thing,
right?
Where one amount comes in, another amount goes out. If the total of output and input comes in, they see that he sent out the 1099s they want him to send out, or any other contractor that we're working on. I'm just trying to understand the money flow.
Yes and no. I don't want to get too much into the weeds with people.
In principle, is it close enough?
In principle, it's close enough, but there are costs that, like, for example, Tribal Mischief purchased all of the software and everything that we were using for many of the things like producing videos and doing all that. They actually did that at a loss, but they show, the income on their financials. They show the income that they receive from NERFA, and then, have to account for that, in terms of their own financing, which is separate from ours, right? They're a company at that point that we are contracting with, and they are responsible for reporting their whole financial situation, which involves more than just the employees that they were employing on NERFA's behalf. It involves other costs and such for their company.
Got it. So if I had just said everything that they spent and where it went that flows from that, instead of making it 1099s, it would be more in keeping.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any more questions here about financial stuff? Steve Brown, recommend you watch the recording on the access the web for our online conference. Yes, thank you, Jennifer.
You can ignore that. That's just a comment. I don't need to make it here. Thank you.
Okay.
I came in late because I spent 2 hours in Philadelphia Folk Festival.
Yeah, I'm glad someone mentioned the online conference. Let me just take a quick minute, because there's been a lot of questions over the last couple of years about, was this just a sweetheart deal for Tribal Mischief to run our conference for us that year? And we did do some homework before we went down that road with Tribal Mischief. And the homework was frightening to us, honestly, as a board, because we wanted to do an online conference. We felt we needed to bring the community together. And the costs were like staggering. And when I say staggering, I mean, we looked at companies that did it. We met with other people who would put on online conferences. I spoke to my wife, who works for the JCCA and is involved with their conferences, and said, well, what does it cost you guys to do this? What's the software like? And the costs were like, oh my God, we'll never be able to do this. Not the way we wanted to, which was a high quality conference where people could, have these rooms together, all those kinds of things. I mean, there are cheap ways to do it. I'm not saying there aren't, but the, you know, for the kinds of things we were looking to do, it looked impossible. And then, you know, at that point, we decided to talk about Tribal Mischief doing it. And Ethan described what he thought they could do. And we were like, really? This does not sound like a good deal for you. And I don't think it was, honestly, but I'm glad we did it, and I'm happy with the outcome of it. Okay, we got some things in the chat.
So Dan, can I just speak just really quickly about something?
Sure.
I just want you guys to understand, for me personally, and for a lot of the people I've talked to, this has never been about the money, right? So nobody's thinking anybody's getting rich, but it has been about not disclosing this, right? And making it really clear. And I've heard you say, and I appreciate you saying it, that you had these reservations about the conflicts of interest. We're talking about two people on the board, and we're talking about the executive director and giving a contract without a bid and with an obvious conflict of interest to those folks for very good reasons that you've explained. So I would just say this: if you had just explained that and send it to the membership or put it on NERFA Talk and said, hey, we've got a situation where we've got to do something in a short-term basis. We've got some people who are going to do it cheaply, and you just disclosed it, none of this would have been an issue, I don't think. I don't think anybody would have cared. But because it felt like it was hidden and it wasn't disclosed, people kept digging and pecking at it. And that's all I got to say about it.
I try really hard, Rob, not to lose my patience with you, but I have to say something, which is that, listen, for 2 straight years, I spoke at the general meeting, which is when we all gathered together, for over an hour, explaining exactly what you just said. Why didn't you tell anyone? And it's really frustrating to me. I can't help the fact of whether someone decides to attend the general meeting or not. But if you want to talk, you keep saying, and this drum has gotten beaten and beaten and beaten about how we are not transparent. God, you know, when I first joined NERFA, there was 1 meeting a year. And at that meeting, people shared everything that they could about what was going on with the organization. And when I attended the first couple of meetings before I was the treasurer, the report about finances was about 5 minutes. I spent an hour at 2 meetings diving into this and explaining exactly what I'm explaining tonight, minus the pictures. And I'm sorry if you weren't there, but to continually to beat this drum as though we haven't tried to let people know and be honest and straightforward with people, I just don't, it's just not the reality. I mean, you can keep saying it, but it's not reality.
So really quickly, I want to jump in on a couple of things for clarity, because you made a couple of statements that weren't incorrect, Dan, but I just wanted to make sure I'm being clear regarding money that went to Tribal Mischief.
Yes,
the deal with all of my contractors, and part of the reason that we ended up going in that direction specifically is I needed people with significant video editing experience. I needed people that had run virtual conference materials, and the people that we found within the community didn't have experience in doing large scale versions of that. And the people we found outside of the community cost a lot of money. So Tribal Mischief, basically, I took the company that really was Pesky J. Nixon, like that was the company that Pesky lived under. I took that company and I used it to find those contractors and go out and find enough work to justify them working for me. So anyone that worked for me for NERFA, if they earned $10,000 from NERFA, I had to go out and find enough work for them to make it a true part-time job, to make it worthwhile. So for instance, Kimberly Sinclair, working for me for NERFA, made 2.5 times what she made working for NERFA with the other clients that I had to go out and find. So that was the justification. It was me trying to step in and find a way to get us the expertise that we wanted at the price we had. That being said, the other thing that is important, because Dan alluded to some of the money going to overhead, the vast majority of the money that went to overhead actually was essentially going back to NERFA. NERFA did not pay for StreamYard. It didn't pay for Zoom. To this day, This is not NERFA's Zoom account. This is Tribal Mischief's Zoom account. I pay for this. Almost all of the software that we used for those 2 years, I specifically moved to the company because I used it for all of the clients, and I didn't want to charge NERFA what would equate to $4,000 to $5,000 when all was said and done at the end of the year for something I was using for other stuff. So I just wanted to have a quick conversation about how the overhead of that worked and how it was really a group attempt. And to specifically talk about conflict of interest, one of the first things we did, and I can't speak to the old past of NERFA, but one of the first things we did as a board in 2020 and early 2022, especially when I stepped in as a staff member, is we made it very, very clear we needed conflict of interest forms, and anyone that had anything to do with that had to sign them. It had to be filed. And we have those conflict of interest forms that I've signed every year that I've gotten paid. Because as most of us know, if we've been in the scene, we're all related to each other. We've done business. I have done business with 2/3 of the people on this call, whether as a performer, as a presenter, as a promoter. I ran a virtual conference for Ellis Paul over there. We've all had those things. And by the way, that's been consistent through NERFA's history. NERFA has consistently, when we needed to hire someone, use the board at times to find people to do it. That is not new. And it's as long as you're being clear about it, which we've done, has generally, legally speaking, that's how it works. So I just wanted to say, again, we've filed, we've done the paperwork, it's sitting there. And in the sense of the outside world, the 2022 AGM has been up and public for a year and a half. It's been sitting there. Dan does an hour-long breakdown in an hour and 25-minute long meeting doing this. He's done that in community meetings and in a number of different places. So if you're interested in going back and checking that, I'm happy to send the links out. Amy, thank you so much for asking me specifically about sort of the executive director role and what goes into that. I gave you the general information there. I'm happy to post that on the website, whatever makes the most sense.
Sure. I appreciate that, Ethan. I just want to comment that Jessica made a comment. Jessica, in response to your comment, all I did was make a response to Dan's saying we should attend the meeting if we want the information. And all I said was we had a very difficult time getting in this year. And what is important to me is that people don't take that statement that I made and turn it into an attack of Ethan or his services. I made a simple statement that we had trouble because Dan said you should attend the meeting. So I just responded. It was hard for us, those of us who were online. And I really want to thank Andrew Dunn for helping us with that. That's all I said. So I wasn't attacking you, Ethan,
I didn't
at
take
all.
it that
I never
way.
said anything. Yep,
I
great.
didn't
But it
take
seems like someone
yeah.
else might have. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I didn't read it that way, but I
Great.
appreciate you clarifying. So Dan, this is your meeting. At this point, it has been 2 hours, and I want to be respectful of people's time and attention span.
Sure.
My very first boss gave me a saying that might be slightly blue, but I've believed in my entire life, which is the brain can only absorb what the ass can endure, and we've all been sitting here for a very long time. So
Dan, can I take the floor for a moment? Because I'd like to
Of
discuss
course.
the concept of a conflict of interest. But I want to leave the NERFA setting for a moment because sometimes I think unrelated analogies are a little bit more, a little easier to dig your heels into, bite your teeth into. A bunch of years ago, a good friend of mine, cancer survivor 2 times over, started a pediatric cancer survivor fund, which got big quick. A lot of money out there for cancer patients, not a lot of money out there for cancer survivors, believe it or not. She asked if I would consider running as the endowment director, which of course I did, got elected. And then the board came to me and said, do you think your firm might be able to provide financial services at like a deep discount? I said, of course we would. We wound up giving them financial services at an 80% discount, which is about enough to recuperate about half of our cost. So I was basically out of pocket paying half of the cost for them to use my firm. And I did it because one of my dearest friends in the world, who was also a cancer survivor, started a nonprofit. yes, that can pose a potential conflict of interest. But as long as we report everything accurately, and I am not abusing my role, such as overcharging the charity, that would be a conflict of interest, because my responsibility was to the organization. So if I were overcharging them, that is a conflict of interest. But the board hiring my company at an 80% discount is not inherently a conflict of interest. This is a very, very, very important distinction. Secondly, we did consult with competitors. We consulted with 3 other companies that could offer the services that NERFA was offering. We knew that they would not even come close. To what Tribal Mischief. We consulted with 3 companies to compare the prices of what Tribal Mischief was offering. We knew that nobody could touch him because Ethan's a folkie and Ethan loves NERFA. So of course he was going to do it super cheap. But we had to do it because we had to fulfill our obligations to validate that it was not a conflict of interest, that Ethan was not abusing his role as executive director. So number one, let us distinguish between a potential conflict of interest and somebody who's actually conflicting interests. The second thing is, and this is just as important, when people say, did it never occur to the board that putting services out to another company would look bad? What you're doing is you have already come to the conclusion that that did not happen. What I think Dan and I would prefer to see is people saying, hey, did you guys put bid out? Did you guys consult with other companies? Did you guys or did you just, as this, just give it to Tribal? We did not just give it to Tribal Mischief. And so one of the problems with social media is when somebody says, why didn't you do this? The readers assume that wasn't done. But we did consult with 3 other companies and nobody came close because Ethan was making just a ridiculously awesome discount. So I wanted to use the analogy of myself because we're not talking about me and we're not talking about this other nonprofit cancer charity, but in reality it was the exact same situation. They went to an elected member of their committee and asked if I could hire me at a significant discount, and of course I did. The potential for conflict of interest was there, but nobody was putting their own interests in front of the company, so there was no conflict, and everything was reported according to the letter of the law. So I just wanted to make a mention about conflicts of interest and the potential and things that need to be done to ensure that a potential conflict of interest doesn't actually become a conflicting interest.
It was me who said it, so you can say it was me. That's fine.
Oh, I didn't
say
even look at the name.
You said somebody. It was me. And I'm telling you why I said it. I'm telling you why, because I listened to Dan speak in this year's annual meeting. I listened to Dan speak in last year's annual meeting. And the impression was given that no RFP went out, that there was just, we talked to some people. It was very informal. So,
yes.
And you've got to, I mean, it sounded like it was not a formal process, that I don't see any paperwork. I don't see any RFPs. That would be transparency. Look at the bids we got from these other people. They sucked. We took this one instead. That would be transparency.
I will personally apologize on behalf of Dan if it wasn't absolutely clear that we did that. And I appreciate, I didn't know who made that comment. I thought it was concerning. But I would also say that anytime I was asked, I was like, yeah, this is what we did. So like, I totally respect that anybody would have a valid concern if that wasn't done. And I think that anybody should ask if it was done. And I appreciate what you just said.
It was asked at the annual meeting last year and the year before, and that's the answer we got.
I want to make sure,
it was there.
I'm going to cut in here. I want to make sure we're being clear. There was not a formal RFP. I know what you mean when you say that, Carolyn.
Yes, thank you.
Formal RFP.
Oh yes, there was not a formal. I was very careful to not use the term RFP because at the time there was not.
Well, you did for a bit there, so I just want to make it clear. Look, you know what? If this doesn't satisfy people that we were doing the best we can, I'm sorry. I mean,
nobody's questioning that. I'm just telling you the optics are terrible.
Well,
terrible. Whether or not it was above board and if it's totally legal, that's fine. And I understand it's
not truly a conflict of interest, but it looks terrible and
No.
people do not like it. It looks terrible.
I
If
have
you
to
were
tell you
honest
something.
about it from the beginning, it wouldn't have looked so terrible,
See,
maybe.
that's the
Carolyn,
thing,
wait,
Carolyn,
no, Matt,
you're using,
Matt.
hang
Hey,
on,
guys.
Dan, hang on, Dan, please. Carolyn, I really appreciate the comments that you're making. And, you know, the optics, the clarity, but then you go on to use the word honesty. Now, using the word honesty is.
When did I
pointing
use
at
the word
some-
honesty? Oh,
Yes,
just
you
now.
did.
Sorry.
So I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that like.
Obfuscation has been happening.
If I might,
Obfuscation. You guys
if
are.
I may, thank you.
Mhm.
I really do appreciate the things that you're saying. And I think optics are really, really important. And I think
Yeah.
over the last few months, I think that everybody here has learned a lot of stuff. But I just want to make a distinction between, you know, people that are going out of their way to make accusations. Not you. I'm not talking about you, but on NERPA Talk and on Facebook. I mean, there are people that are throwing out accusations without asking questions. So I just want to make sure that everybody is clear. We did not do a formal RFP. We consulted with 3 other companies to make sure that Tribal Mischief was charging an incredibly good deal. So, you know, this is just a matter of making sure that all the facts are there. And then, Dan, thank you for giving me the floor for a few more minutes. I appreciate it.
I'm sorry, I'm starting to get tired, I think. So I
Also,
apologize.
Jen Rowe's
I'm
hand's been
not.
up for a while, Dan. Just-
Okay, let's let Jen intercept, and then I do have a few things to say. That'll give me a chance to put my thoughts together. Go ahead, Jen.
Well, the cat is in the way, but I just wanted to make a comment about putting things on NERFA Talk. I think that gets a little bit dangerous when we start putting things up for everybody's input on everything. Transparency, absolutely important. And there should have been information in the minutes for hiring Ethan and Tribal Mischief that has been stated, that should have been done. They did that moving forward. And it just goes back to this thing that we're bringing up the same issue over and over and over again. It's been addressed. It's been addressed multiple times. And I'm confused why we keep on going back to the same issue that has been addressed, that has been resolved. We know how much Ethan was paid. We know that he was paid a fair, well, actually below fair value. When I saw the numbers, I'm like, wow, they got a really good deal because I know how much it cost. I did. And actually, Focal Lines did not do an RFP for our online service. Now, granted, we didn't use an inside contractor for that. So that is different and unique, but we did get bids from several organizations or several companies, just like NERFA did. And it is a lot of, you know, we're also talking about a new product that no one knew what we're doing, trying to put it together. And I'm confident that NERFA did not spend too much money on Ethan. But yes, there are things they could have done different in marking it and making it more visible. But I would absolutely encourage them not to be putting it out to NERFA Talks for input. Maybe for clarity of what happened, which I do believe was done at the AGM.
Well, if the meeting minutes were on, there are no minutes for anybody to read, for instance, on the website. So no one really has any idea about any of it unless they go to the annual meeting. That's really the only way that people get information now.
Carol Ann.
I'm not saying you should put it on NERFA Talk. God, no, that's not what that's for.
Can I ask you, please, how many years
Yeah.
have you been involved with NERFA?
More than 20 years.
Okay. Did you ever see minutes from the board meetings up on the?
We didn't have a website, Dan. The website
Right.
was terrible because it was the birth of the, I mean, and you guys have no, do you keep minutes? You know, are they there? They should be
That
there.
has been my point throughout this. And I wish you would take a second to listen to what, you know, people are trying to say. This is a transition period. We
No, it's
have been
not.
working very hard to make this a successful transition for NERFA. And all we have heard from you, who is someone who's a respected member of our community for the last 6 months, is how terrible a job we've done. Well, let me tell you, I think, first of all, that we've done a damn good job. And I'm on a lot of nonprofit boards. And I've gone through this process with a lot of organizations. And it's just disingenuous for you to keep doing this. We have done what we could do. Yes, you know what, Carol Ann? We didn't have the greatest secretaries because people haven't stepped forward with those skills. So our secretaries didn't do a great job of sometimes getting information out to people, didn't do a great job of putting together perfect minutes. They're not, people don't come to the board and say, gee, I've got this skill that I've been honing for a lifetime, and now I'm going to just give it to you guys. We would love that. That's what we've been looking for. The people that we recruited to be on the board this year, the people that are running, they're not people who have been lifetime NERFA people. They're people who have skills that we really need. And instead of looking at that and trying to see, well, maybe this is really going to serve NERFA, we now have a contested election in which probably.
So I shouldn't have stepped forward? Should I have just sat on my hands?
Let me finish.
You know, go ahead.
Okay?
Go ahead.
Now we have an election in which we are not going to have those people available to us. I don't know what your skills are. I don't know what Cheryl's skills are. I don't know what Pam's skills are. I hope that they are what we need. But the transition we have been going through for the last 5 years is to try and fill the board with people who have these skills for exactly the reason of the things that you're talking about. Yes, of course we want NERFA to be, to look to the world like a well-organized, well-oiled machine. But it takes years to develop that in an organization when you go from being a founder organization, which I've been talking about ad nauseum, to an organization that can function and sustain itself. It takes time. We don't have all of these things in place. We don't have all our I's dotted and our T's crossed, but we have been working on it. We developed every single policy that's called upon for a nonprofit to have over the last few years. We developed a financial procedures manual about how things are supposed to be reported. We have people fill out conflict of interest forms when they join the board. We now have a detailed description of what it means to be a board member that we can share with new people coming onto the board. We have done the work that needs to be done and that continues to need to be done. But you do not serve the organization well doing these attacks, because the people who have been doing all this work are getting burned out by this, including myself. And I'm just telling you, I'm a person of goodwill. I have never said anything mean or nasty to a single person that I know of involved with this community. And you are burning me out. You are burning other good people out. This is not good for the organization. So take a step back and think about the impact of your words on the organization and on the people that are working for it.
I'm going to
think about.
I'm going to say something, Carol Ann. Let me say something, Carol
Go
Ann.
on, Mara.
Let me say it.
Go on.
Yes. First of all, the resumes of the 3 people that have put themselves forward are astonishingly incredible. They've had years of service, and Pam spent the last 2 years, not this year, working behind the scenes to make that NERFA conference happen. So when you made that statement about having looked at the people because you need certain skills, it didn't reflect to me that you'd really looked at those 3 candidates who have spent years in service of the organization in various ways, and who are trying to step up and make a difference, partly because Ron Olesko said at the annual community meeting that if you have concerns or complaints, don't sit on your hands. Do something. Put yourself in. And I understand and I feel for you, Dan, in the position you're in, because I think you're trying to do the best that you can. I really do. I believe the board members are doing a wonderful job. And I don't think that people mean to attack the people that are on the board currently. And I understand the difficulties you guys are faced with, but to make blanket statements as such that disqualify the current people who've put themselves forth because they want to make a difference and come and help. I understand all the negative discourse is not helping. It's making things worse. But I don't believe that everything that's being said by Carol Ann or the others has been a specific attack. They're bringing up specific points that people have concerns about. And I really appreciate that you and that you both tonight have come to try to, and what a difficult situation it is. But I just want to step in and just say, I don't think it's fair to say that they don't have the skills that you might need, because they have a lot of skills, and Pam in particular organized behind the scenes. I know that she's done a lot of work organizing behind the scenes. So I just want to say, I think that it's reached a point where we're not being fair to each other. We're not being fair to each other.
I'm sorry, but I think that this demands a response, and I'll try to do it without emotion since I
But you can be
recognize that-
emotional because
No,
it's an
no,
emotional
no.
situation for
Okay.
everyone, but I want to say,
Let me-
don't disqualify, don't
I'm not-
disqualify them. Don't
I did not
disqualify
say
them.
anything disqualifying about them,
Okay.
but I also did not start a campaign for a petition that says Save NERFA. And I did not recruit people to sign that campaign. And I
Carol Ann didn't
do-
start it either,
Uh,
and neither did Cheryl.
Excuse
So,
me. Let me
she didn't.
finish what I'm saying, please. Okay. So you're asking about people's qualifications, and you mentioned Pam Robinson in particular, and you mentioned the other candidates. Well, let me tell you that first of all, that is not actually factually true, what you're saying, that we don't value their skills. I was the person who recruited and suggested Pam Robinson work with us last year on shaping the conference for 2022. I met with Pam Robinson, with Ethan Baird, and with others every week for an entire year in preparation for that conference. We worked together closely. And when the conference came, there were issues that arose that I'm not going to get into here because it's really none of anyone's business. But there were issues that arose, and as a result, Pam did not continue in that role the following year. I did value her skills tremendously, so much so that I advocated for her to be part of our process and met with her on a weekly basis for an entire year. I spent more hours with Pam than probably most of the people on this call. Cheryl Prasker showed interest in the board about, I don't know, what was it, Cheryl, 6 months ago or so? And we scheduled a meeting to sit down with Cheryl and talk about some of the ways in which the organization was functioning now, and to, ask her to think about what she might contribute to the organization if she rejoined us. And we asked her to get back to us, after she had given it some thought, and to tell us what she thought she could contribute. We never heard anything back after that. And I'm not saying that as an attack on Cheryl in any way, but just to make it clear that the idea that we were devaluing people who might have something to offer the organization just simply isn't the case. We have been seeking those people out and trying to give them opportunities to contribute the entire time I've been on board.
And they've made it clear that there's certain conditions in which they have not felt comfortable. And this year, people are really putting themselves forward because they feel that's the only way to make a change. That's all I need to say about it, Dan. That's why. That's all. That's why. And I appreciate you, Ethan, everyone. I'm just trying to be calm.
Appreciate it, Mar.
That's all. Thank you.
I want to just both do a time check. We're 2.5 hours in, and also I think we're now having conversations that aren't really about the finances, which is really what the intention was and what we set up this meeting for. So with that being said, we don't want to cut off anyone's questions as it relates to anything like that. I hope we've created a good amount of clarity regarding questions and concerns that have been brought up. I want to again recognize that if you are interested in seeing it, the AGM for 2022 has been up in public for over 1.5 years, where these things were addressed, and we're welcome to review them there if you want to look into the history. If you're interested, and again, I love people asking straightforward things like, can we have an executive director description write-up? We'll get that up on the website in the next day or so. If there's other information that you're looking for, please let us know.
Yes,
AGM is the annual general meeting, Cheryl.
Can you, some people have asked why you don't have the information about the elections up on the website. Not everybody that is a NERFA member is on social media, and that's, besides the emails, that's the only way you've put the information up. Folk Alliance, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jen, Folk Alliance does put the information about their elections up.
Well, Mara so importantly shared with us that we screwed up. I think it's an example of even an organization that has paid staff screw up at times.
Okay.
We do have our slate, or have had our slate up. Last year we had someone that came in and self-nominated, and it was very last minute. I didn't realize until the ballot went out, had to bring the ballot in, put him on,
Wow.
And then this year we had another self-nominated person, but we failed to put it on the website because I did not realize that we literally just went what we did last year. So that was a failure on my part for not reading the bylaws more closely, but we should have it on the website according to our bylaws. But we did not this past year, and hopefully we will not make that mistake in the future. But of course, when the ballot goes out, all the information is on the ballot for all the candidates with their ballot statement and bio. I will state that the 2 people that put themselves forward were elected to the board. So thankfully, it was not negatively affected their election process. And I just want to reiterate, as I stated before.
Do you think it should be on or not on? Just because
I don't know what NERFA's
we've been
bylaws state. I know what our bylaws
NERFA's
doesn't state
bylaws
anything.
state that we follow the clauses of Folk Alliance bylaws when it comes to the election. That's what it states. We
Okay.
follow the clauses of the Folk Alliance bylaws, and one of them is to put the candidates' information on the corporation's website. So that's what we were having a conversation about. And I made a request at the last community meeting, and I'm making another request that we follow the clause of the bylaws. And for times remaining prior to the election, I know you send out a few more emails with ballot reminders to people that the information is on our corporation's website. That's a request I've made. Just following the
Eric
bylaws.
Balky's had his hand up. So
Yeah.
Thank
in a second.
I apologize, Eric. Do you mind if I just address that very quickly and hand it back to you afterwards, if that's all right, Eric? If not, I also understand. Okay. When I spoke with Jen and I spoke with Ashley about what FAI's standard procedure was regarding posting election information, what I was told is that they posted the slate. And given where we are, and that, as Jen just said, is what they have done for the last 2 years.
They made a mistake in the last 2 years, is what she said, and she just realized it.
Yes, understood.
So
but
what I'm
that's
asking us to correct ours now
understood.
and
What
put
I'm-
the slate up.
What I'm trying to convey, Mara, is what I was told is that's what they did. In seeing that, that struck me as being worse. So I didn't put that information up. Now, understanding what their intent is and what they want us to do, I'm happy to do that. I have no problem with that. It struck me as being far worse to do the other thing. So I didn't want to do that. So I just wanted to clarify that as far as why we were doing what we were doing. I was trying to follow their lead as best I could until it looked like it would be more divisive. So, Eric, go for it.
Yeah, so financial related. Just the way my mind works around numbers and stuff. I know that years ago, probably 20 years ago, when I used to submit to for showcase consideration, I believe I had to be a Folk Alliance member to submit for a showcase at NERFA. And every year since then, I've redone my membership for a variety of reasons, but mostly to stay involved with NERFA, whether I'm going or not. In 24 years, I think I figured out I might have gone 8 to 10 times in 24 years. But I guess my thought is we're talking about the money, and we're talking about $60,000 for an executive director plus staff. And that, I just that just doesn't sound like a lot. I'm wondering, comparatively, for 20 years, I've been spending $70 a year and to send it to Folk Alliance. I mean, I would, if I had my choice, I feel like I'm signing up for NERFA. Mara posted a comment, or someone posted a comment, what if we get a portion of that back? And I don't know how many members we have that are paying to sign up, but if it's 1,000, then that's 70,000, and if it's 2,000, that's twice that. So and then I think, what is the budget for running something? What is a budget for running? First of all, let's say that Ethan, I'm concerned that Ethan's unreplaceable. If we have to all of a sudden put on a conference without Ethan, and we think we don't have the money now, we're gonna be we're gonna be up in for a big wake up call.
We're screwed. There's no way.
So what does it take to run? What's the total budget to run NERFA?
So let me talk a little bit about this.
Well,
So
before you
we're-
go, Dan, let me just finish and just so I
Oh,
can
okay.
ask all my
I'm sorry.
questions before I lose my train of thought, which is
Please finish.
it's a pretty loose train as it is. I'm just wondering what it takes to run NERFA, what true market value is if we're paying all people what we would need to pay, and is there a chance we can get money from FAI? I wonder what their budget is versus ours, and I feel like we're sending them money when it would mean so much more to us. We don't have this, I don't know what comparatively their staff is to our staff and their budget to our budget. So that's my complete thought, is I feel like we're running on a shoestring, and I wonder if, I wonder about those things, like how much it costs to run it.
Ethan, you want to respond? Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot in that question, and there's a lot in the history of the relationship between the two organizations. And there are moments that haven't been particularly frictionless between the two organizations, and there are moments where it's been a really wonderful and fruitful partnership. I'm happy to say where we are right now is more towards the latter of those two options, and I've really enjoyed the work that I've been able to do with Jen and Ashley and both the staff and the board members over there. We are actively involved in a conversation about the implementation this year of a revenue sharing process regarding membership. And we're working on the fine details as far as what percentage that would be. And to your point, Eric, yes, it would make a huge difference to us. And it would, just back of the napkin, right now, the only two staff members are Natalia and I, and the total, by your estimation, which is not entirely incorrect, the membership cost would more than cover the staffing cost that we need or that we would have. Go ahead. That's a follow-up
It also
question.
sounds like, by an order of magnitude, that membership alone could pay for the conference. Are those numbers in the same?
No, that's a little much. So there are a couple really important things, and I don't want to. I'll tell you what. Anyone that wants to have a deep dive into this particular conversation at the next community meeting, we can do a super deep dive, because it's a fascinating relationship. And again, I want to be always super fair to our partners over there, because I adore them and I think the world of them. But it's been a relationship that's been back and forth between healthy and not healthy, and we're finally in a healthy place. And part of recognizing that we're in this place is actually going back to the regional agreement that was signed in 2016 that no one agrees was a good agreement, and no one agrees was a healthy agreement on either side at this point, and going back and identifying how to fix that. And part of that is revenue sharing, and part of that is sharing of resources, and that's a two-way street. We're going to start monthly watch parties of all of the videos that were done at the conference next month, and FAI is going, at least I'm working with Ashley, so that is going to be a piece of content that FAI is going to be promoting and going to be co-presenting with us. So there is sort of a growth opportunity in that space. So to your overall question of, would it be helpful if we took some of that membership money? Absolutely. And we're working on that. And that's going to work really well for a number of reasons. One of which is, as of last year, the number of people that came to NERFA who happened to be FAI members was pretty much at the lowest since I've been associated with the organization. And for what it's worth, I have been on the board since 2017, but I've been on the programming committee since 2013, and I've been coming to and taking part in the conference since 2007. So while I recognize there are people that have been here for longer, I don't think I'm a spring chicken anymore at about 16 years of involvement, six on the board, 3 as staff, 10 in programming. So I can talk about the history somewhat there and how that works. and how it always has worked. And I think it's really important when we're talking about the history to recognize some of those changes, not ever to call into question the devotion and the wonderful work that was done before, but just understanding that we created systems because we had to get something done. That's the history of any organization. And we're now at a point where we have to address a bunch of that information and collate it, make it official, and have a conflict of interest form that everyone has to sign, and have disclosure of interest, and have information like that at a top level, so that there's never a question that someone's getting paid. Everyone on the board, every human being on the board knows exactly every cent that I've been paid since I started here, knows exactly every cent that Natalia gets paid. There is an absolute clarity within leadership, and that wasn't always the case. And that's not because Diane did something wrong. It's not because Cheryl did something wrong. It's not because any member of the board did something wrong. It's because that's where we were at the time. And in fairness to Diane, she was a one-woman army. Everything lived under her hat.
And she didn't get paid. She only took an honorarium. So she didn't know. She never got a salary. She took an honorarium every year. Oh, she bought herself a printer one year, I will admit, but she didn't get paid.
She paid herself $7,000 for the last 3 years.
But before that, not a penny.
No, understood.
And actually, at the very
reason
beginning,
I'm saying that is
did
because
you know that at the very beginning, NERFA gave Focalines $13,000 every year?
From what I've seen in the records, we've given five-figure donations to FAI regularly. I think 2012 or 2013 was the last year we did.
Yeah.
So NERFA very much was a sponsor of FAI, not only in being a regional, but literally.
Well, actually, and Diane reminded me that if it wasn't for the Philadelphia Folk Song Society, NERFA would not exist, nor would Focalines, because when Focalines started, and as everybody knows, it started in Diane's kitchen and then went to Malibu. We all know that. But then, so the Philadelphia Folk Song Society helped NERFA with all the volunteers and with money, which is amazing. And a lot of people don't know the history or the relationship between the Philadelphia Folk Song Society. And we had our office in the Philadelphia Folk Song Society's office for 20 years. And yeah, so that just so people know of the relationship between the Philadelphia Folk Song Society. So I'm actually sad that we weren't able to move this meeting tonight, because a lot of people who wanted to be on this meeting had to be on that meeting because it was their elections. But anyways, that's the history between the Philadelphia Folk Song Society and NERFA.
Well, luckily it'll be recorded and posted for anyone. And yes, sir.
Yeah. I just want to make sure you're done before I speak. Sorry.
I'd say, just as sort of my closing statement on a lot of this, there's always an opportunity to communicate more, and I don't think anyone within the organization would ever argue that we have harnessed every possible opportunity. I can tell you that the number of emails that we've sent out in the last 2 years eclipses every email that we've sent in the 20 years leading up to it. I'd say I know factually the number of social media posts made in the last year eclipses the entirety of every social media post in the complete history beyond that.
We didn't have social media.
Well, we have since 2011. So it's only been 14 years. But still, my point being with all of this is we're not, nor will we ever claim that we're hitting the ball out of the park every time. We're trying. And the fact that this is the second meeting this week that we've collected 60 people, I would look at any time previous to 2019 and ask, had that ever occurred within the same month? And the answer would be no, because it's a different world. And we've been running peer groups, and we've been running panels, and we've been running educational opportunities year round for 3 years. And that isn't across the board. SURF is not doing that. SWERF is not doing that. Far West does some wonderful stuff. But, and Farm does amazing stuff. I will never say anything but fantastic stuff about them. handicaps is amazing. And FAI has been stepping up, but we're all adjusting to this new normal. But to pretend that it's 2018, 17, 16, when the board met once a year and basically ran a once a year 4-day event. And yes, I know there were 1 days. That was my first.
Actually, we did meet by phone call, but can you imagine 12 people on a phone call? Yeah, we did have monthly
You imagine doing
meetings.
this on a phone call?
Yeah, well, we did. We had monthly board meetings on phone, but it
Oh,
wasn't.
I
pretty.
meant community meetings.
Oh,
You
yeah.
imagine having a community meeting like this with Joel? Anyway,
Oh, geez.
so I say all of this lovingly, and I'm not like most of the people on here that are the old timers have known me for at least a decade and a half. I grew up in this community. I've been working in coffee houses since I was 13 years old, which means I've only been here for 30 years. But a lot of people here have been my heroes and friends and people that I adore. And we're all working towards the same end, I think, I hope. But I just wanted to say that because I don't believe we're always treating each other, and I'm guilty too. I don't believe we're all treating each other like that. And I'd like us to adopt at least that method of engagement. Because I adore you, Cheryl. I have adored you for a long time. You were the first. The funny thing is, people said we're a nice community. We're always nice, and you were the very first person I talked to at my very first NERFA, and you greeted me kindly. And then Jake and I started playing music in a corner in the lobby, and the second person to talk to us heard us playing, and decided to walk over to these two newbies in the corner, to have us stop playing for a moment just so we could say, that's not folk music, you don't belong here. And that person has been doing that for 20 years. And you know who it is, Cheryl, because I talked to you about it. And we know that there are people in the community that do that, and we don't talk to them enough about the problem with that. And it's not being anti-community to call ourselves out or to ask that we try better in some ways. And I just want to say that because I fear when we talk about things that weren't perfect, people think that we're saying that people were bad. And I don't think that's what we're saying. I think we're just saying there's an opportunity to do better. And that's what we're aiming for. And that's the end of my pulpit. I'll shut up.
Okay.
Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, I want to make some closing remarks too. And I don't have Ethan's long history. So, one of the struggles for me being in this organization is I don't know most of the people. And so I don't have the relationships and the history to fall back on when all of this is going on, that's been going on for the last 3 months. I have a limited history with the organization, but I want to kind of answer Eric's question a little bit about the future, because I think it's a really, really important question. The reason for doing the things that we've been trying to do is that for an organization like NERFA to be sustained without that wonderful gift that Diane gave to us, for that to happen into the future, we must put into place the kind of organizational structure that will make us attractive to other people outside of our community to give us support, to grant writers, to sponsors, to people who have money they can bring to us. And the difference between organizations that survive moving from a founder organization to a sustainable nonprofit on their own and those that don't is their ability to do that. And so, yes, a lot of our energy and time over the last 5 years has been dedicated to formalizing things, to making our organization look like we know it needs to look like, for someone outside to come in and say, gee, we want to give you money. We want to support you. We want to find ways to help you guys to keep going. And that process sometimes means that we're distracted from other things. You know, when we spend, you know, we have spent I don't want to even do it because it'll sound like we're being defensive to say this, but we spend a lot of time on this. It's not overstating it to say we put in thousands of hours over the last 5 years. It's not overstating it. And we are trying to put that in place so that NERFA will be here in the future. And when we talk, and I apologize to Carol Ann, you know, sometimes when we're having a back and forth, I'm not as clear as I want to be. I treasure the people who formed this organization. I volunteered to be part of it as a complete outsider because of the good feelings I had about those people. Some of them who were specifically here, like right now, like Cheryl. And when I joined the board and learned that Cheryl had left it, the first thing I felt was, oh no, she was the person I was looking forward to being on a board with. My son had such wonderful things to say about her, and now she's not even going to be there. And the first question I asked was, why? Why isn't Cheryl on the board? I thought I was going to be on the board with her. So I have no, you're so welcome, Cheryl. And I have no bad feelings about anyone here. I do feel occasionally, you know, hurt, and that can come off as defensiveness, but it's not. I'm an outsider trying to make my way among people who I'm just getting to know in many ways. And it's been 5 years of doing that, and you know, for a lot of that time, it's been difficult. You know, this is not an easy thing to do, what we're trying to do, and we need help. It's not that we don't need help. And when I say we're looking for specific skills, it's not to devalue anyone. It's because we were looking for specific skills. We wanted Joel to be on the board because having that strong connection with someone who's a leadership person in you know, the Canadian world of folk music was really valuable to NERFA. It wasn't comparing him to what you offer or Cheryl offers or anyone else in our community offers. We would have gladly jumped on the opportunity to have any of you join the board at any point. And I'm not saying we won't now. It's just that we really have some work to do. And it is in some ways substantially different from the work that people have had to do in the past. It is a different task. And I have no doubt that you'll bring skills to it, that Cheryl will, that Pam will. I know Pam's skills. I've always admired her skills. You know, but we need to do that work. And if we don't do that work, we run the risk of being another aging organization in the folk music community that can't sustain itself. And since none of you know me, I'll tell you that I went through the same kind of process with the Ashokan Center, where I've been on the board for I think something like 10, 12 years, ever since we became an organization just about. And we made the transition successfully, so I know it can be done. We went from an organization that raised $60,000 a year to support ourselves, which sounds like a lot to NERFA, but when you're a multi-million-dollar organization, it's not a lot, to an organization that now raises well over $1 million a year. So I know it can be done, and I know what it takes to get it done. And that's all we're reaching for. We're not trying to make anyone feel devalued or like the past didn't have value. And all of these things that people are reading into things, I just feel terrible about them. And I think everyone on the board does. I don't think it's an understatement to say that. And we want to move forward with people. That's the end of my...
I do want to answer really quickly the thing that Eric brought up that I don't think I actually answered because it's late and I have ADD and I didn't take my pill this morning. The question of FAI and budget versus us and budget. And I say this with respect to FAI. I don't know. I apologize. I downloaded this year's financial review, so I can't speak to this year's numbers. But I've certainly read the previous years, and their budget, at least one of the years, I believe, and Jen's going to correct me if I'm wrong, was roughly $10 million. We represent less than 1% of their budget. And
It's
I'm
not $10 million.
I'm
It's
sorry.
$1.7 million.
Was that the amount raised? Because there was a 10 million somewhere.
No,
No?
never in my,
Oh.
no. Our operating
I was being
budget
wishful.
is, I wish, yeah.
Yeah.
I do have hopes to get to Taylor Swift to set up an endowment. So if anyone has a connection with her, she's in Kansas City a lot. That's my big thing.
so-
But no, we're
You
we're
go
about
get her.
1.6.
If
Thank you.
anybody can get her, it's you,
That's
Jennifer.
you, Jen.
That's
will-
why it's on my list, but it's
Right.
1.7 million, and our membership revenue is about $200,000 annually. And to what Ethan already said, Folk Alliance is in conversation with the regions and with our board, and we'll be discussing revenue sharing at the board meeting, which is scheduled next month.
So I thank you for correcting me. I
Always,
don't-
Ethan,
yeah.
always.
Appreciate it. So I go back, we're not less than 1%, we're roughly 1% of your budget. And
10%, Ethan.
10%, decimals, not my specialty. That's why you're the treasurer. And it's appropriate to me that they're larger. I don't know that we shouldn't be able to bridge some of that gap, because we are providing services year round now, and we're proud of it. We're really proud of it, because we are told repetitively by the venues that are shutting down that they need more help. We are told repetitively by the artists that can't find support that they need more help. And we want to do that, but that does take money, and that takes budget to be able to service that. Because we can do a lot of things just out of friendship, which I know we all do. I know I do. But if we want to have an organization that has an up-to-date list of venues, that's going to require someone spending an awful lot of time, because someone does it roughly every 5 to 10 years. Someone puts it, I think Gordon Nash was the last person that put hundreds of hours into putting together a giant list of venues. And within about a half a year, it wasn't all that accurate, because places closed down, new places. So like, if that's something that we want to do as an organization, we can do it, but it means having someone that spends not just one time doing that, but spends their time making sure it's up to date. And that's just one of many, many, many examples. Anyway, Mara, and
Just
then
a
I
quick,
think
yeah,
Natalia
just
is
very,
going to
real quick, just
Mm-hmm.
to acknowledge something that I understand happened, regardless of whether or not people think it's important, but Pam did an enormous amount of work last year at the conference, and at the end, when everyone was invited on stage to be acknowledged, she was not. And I just want to mention that that is something that happened. I'm not making a judgment about it, but I would imagine how that felt when you did an enormous amount of work to put the conference together. So I just want to mention that. And because I attended virtually, so I was there virtually. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I think as I opened up the meeting, I might grab the honor of closing the meeting. But before we do, we are going to stay here until every last question is answered. Charles, did I see you raise your hand, or was that you scratching your head?
I was applauding your motion to wind down.
Okay. Hey, listen, folks, when I spoke to Dan about an hour before the meeting, I said, the primary objective that I'm hoping for is for people throughout the community to distinguish between decisions they may disagree with and people being bad people. There was a comment that was made a while ago that sort of suggested that the community should be consulted about everything. And it was reiterated just a moment ago with this conversation about the listserv and how a lot of organizations still use listservs and how a lot of people think that they are very valuable. And I'm in an organization, we still use a listserv. I will say personally, I really can't stand it. But the point is we use it. But I just want to say a few things here. It is functionally not practical for the board to consult the community about every single detail in running this organization. That's why you elect a board of directors, to try to do the best that we can to represent the community. And I think the biggest concern that I had, especially as a financial professional about all this tax return, especially the 2019, is I've just spent hours showing people like, no, our tax status was not in jeopardy. And I really wanted, I'm hoping that after this meeting, people will understand that there's been a lot of confusion, but bad optics is always something that can be improved upon. But a lot of people on this meeting and a lot of people on social media have projected the idea that we are bad people, that I am wronging the community, or that Dan Gottfried or Ethan is wronging the community. And, you know, we're all volunteers. It is not practical to expect us to be able to anticipate every single question of the entire community. I think the most important thing that all of us, the board, the community, come out of this meeting with is ask, please, before you blame. Because the reality is, even Justin, now a lot of people don't want Justin on the board. There's a vote out there. And even if the vote doesn't go through, I don't even know if Justin's going to stay. The point here is that Justin's a good human being, at least from my perspective. And I've really had my differences. But even leaving Justin aside, Ethan with the tribal mischief thing, Dan with the tax return, me with the tax return, it's just attack after attack after attack. Like, I think we need to get to a point where everybody needs to realize that the present board of directors was elected by you to try the best we can to represent you. And the one thing
Most of you were appointed. Most of you were appointed,
Well,
not
I was
elected.
elected.
That's why we
I was
spoke up.
elected. Okay.
That's why
Yeah.
we
In
spoke
any
up. We
case-
haven't had an election. Right. Maybe you were.
Okay. Well, in any case, if we were appointed by other board members that were elected. My point here is that there is a volume here. There is a layer of accusation of wrongdoing. And it's very, very important for a group of volunteers that it's distinguished between the volunteers doing things and not always getting it right versus having ill will. And if I can guarantee one thing, I guarantee it, we're going to keep making mistakes because we're human. And I'm hoping that we can resolve all of these issues with the idea that everybody here is good people. There's not anybody on this, and I'm looking at the screen, I know every single one of you at least a little bit, and everybody here genuinely wants the best for NERFA, and we really need to work together on that. I want to go all the way back to the beginning. I'm going to ask for a little help here. Our tax status was never in jeopardy. Please reverberate that. And hopefully our 2023 tax return is going to be filed very, very shortly. This meeting was intended to be a finance meeting and to address our taxes. And hopefully we've answered all those questions. I want to just take a moment to, I'm sorry, who was that?
No, this is Rob. I will clarify that on the posts because
That'd
it's
be
very
great, Rob.
important.
I appreciate that.
100% accuracy is so important to me, and I will clarify that immediately.
I appreciate that. It's funny, Rob, when you spoke up, because I was literally about to say, hey, Rob, I want to compliment you on your interest in always finding the truth. I want to compliment Mara. I'm kind of taken back by your willingness to show vulnerability. Cheryl, you might be on the board, not Cheryl Kagan. I'm sorry, the other Cheryl. Appreciate your comments too. I mean, everybody here that has taken the time to be here has taken the time to be here because they care, and we need to use that as our driving force going forward. Before I call this to a close, thank you everybody for being here. But one last call. Are there any other questions? Are you sure? Caroline, too. I want to thank you too. I should probably thank you as well.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. This is, really been a meeting where I'm hoping that people have been able to verbalize a lot of what they're saying and frustrations, and regardless of election outcomes, I appreciate everyone and just looking forward to a further NERFA, strengthening NERFA going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I will be the last person on this meeting. I'm waiting till everybody. Oh, Natalie's got a question.
It's all you.
Natalia, you got to stop calling her Natalie.
I know. I'm going to get my coolness back.
So mad at you for calling me. It's okay. It happens 85 times a day. I just wanted to invite everybody to take a breath before we sign off. And when you sign off and when you stand up, just shake your body. This is a lot of energy, whether you're feeling emotional or not. This is a lot. And maybe it's just because I'm an adult child of some issues. Don't take it to bed with you. Just try to let it go. So just let's all take a breath together if we can. Let that shit go.
Feel free to drop off because I will literally be the last person on the screen.
Well, the two of us, but yes.
Bye-bye.
Dan, stay with me.
Bye,
Stay with me,
people.
Dan.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm a night owl. You might be stuck for a while.